so far.
Yes. We have our own groupies.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like we are live.
Okay. I'm working on.
I see groupies and I see our former member right at the top of the list.
There you go. Welcome. We have our own groupies. So we're still a couple minutes early, so we can wait this out. Hello, everybody that's on the attendee list and the panelists. And this is a new platform. Some of you have already been on meetings this morning, and I think it works really well. It's a little bit clunky, I think, in terms of. So we're still a couple minutes early. So somebody ought to mute that, or. Yeah. Okay. So the way this works is that folks can see us in real time in the webinar, and then if but we can't see all of them until we kind of let them into the panel view. In the meantime, they're kind of on a separate list, and they raise their hand when they want our attention. But the nice thing is that you don't have to get in a waiting room. You don't have to sign up the day before. This is all just so much better. And so I'm trying to figure out how to get my screen so I can see everything, but I will. I had it this morning. Everything was great. But so if there are people that have their hand up and I don't notice it, would someone help me, especially Mary Beth or Abigail? I think we're kind of ready to go. If we,
I see an attendee with the hand up already.
Yes. So I was just everybody that's listening. We got a new committee, and we're welcoming everybody and kind of enjoying this a new platform. It's a little better than what we were using before. I still can't wait to get back in the real session. And I think that'll be a lot better. But with that, let's call the meeting to order. Another thing I usually don't do since we're only 5 people, I'm not big on wasting time calling roll. We know who's here and who's not here, and that's good enough for me. I can count to 3 and get a quorum pretty easily. So, but if I miss something, you can always challenge me. With that, the Revenue Committee is called to order, and our first bill is it Senate File 27? Is that the right number? And we would let former member of this committee and member of the Senate, Senator Affielis, present the bill to us. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I was done with revenue, but not quite yet. So I did email all of you. This bill should be very familiar. Last session, we looked at it briefly. As you recall, in the budget years, we have to have 2/3 of the chamber introducing a bill for a bill to move forward. And we came up just shy of that. And so I'm bringing you back Senate File 27, which is the Essential Health Product Dignity Act. And if you look at the handout that I provided, most states recognize that we do tax tangible property, but we exempt often non-luxury necessities or essential items. And in Wyoming, this includes things like groceries, prescription drugs, and prosthetics. And so under 39-15-105 Romanet A, subparagraph 6, things that we exempt, here's a list. The intrastate transportation of sick, injured, or deceased persons by ambulances. As I mentioned, we exempt prescription drugs, insulin, syringe needles, oxygen, blood plasma, prosthetic devices, hearing aids, eyeglasses. We also exempt non-capitalized equipment for disposable supplies used in medical or dental care. We exempt things like the sale of water delivered by pipeline or truck, as well as the sale of food for domestic or home consumption. And so what this bill would do, Mr. Chairman, is simply add a new subparagraph F to this list, and it would include feminine hygiene products as well as diapers. And so most states do charge impose a sales tax on menstrual pads, tampons, and other related products, treating them more or less as luxury items. However, I can tell you that these items are not luxury at all. For a woman to live with dignity, these items are often expensive, and there have been numerous examples of people who come to me who talk about the fact that, particularly for young girls, if their parents don't have funds, it can be very difficult to get your hands on these products. Over recent years, a number of states have started exempting such products, and in my handout, I list 13 that exempt them entirely. Other states, and this might be a little out of date, but have also been looking at the issue, as well as individual cities. And so just to give you a sense of what this would mean, a menstrual cycle is 3 to 7 days, and it usually occurs from girls starting at age 13 to age 51. And so, this cost adds up, and it's a unique cost that women bear. Along those same lines, the bill would also include diapers, and this affects not only infants, but it affects the elderly. And for anyone who has had to provide elder care for a loved one, a grandparent, a parent, that purchasing diapers is very much a matter of dignity. A lot of people don't like buying them altogether, but in the instances that they have to, they're very expensive. And unfortunately, as I've seen with a lot of end-of-life cases, these things are hot commodities. When my mom died, we had a whole bunch on hand, and I can't tell you how many people were excited to get their hands on the products that she didn't use that we had in our storage closet. And so you can see some of the costs, some of the averages that I included in the handout. And this isn't just borne by our seniors living on fixed incomes. It's often by families who are trying to provide care not only for their children, but for their parents. And so along those lines, other states such as Connecticut, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and 8 others exempt diapers altogether. Some states just exempt only adult diapers. And then there are some states with tax holidays that provide a little bit of relief. And so, Mr. Chairman, this is a very straightforward issue. The revenue impact to the state, I think, is one that we can absorb. If you look at your fiscal impact that's been revised for this session, it would result in about $939,000 in a general fund reduction, as well as a $900,000 reduction for local source funds. And so, Mr. Chairman, I know that budgets are tight in Wyoming. I appreciate that. I know we've got a lot of thinking to do about our tax structure. But when we're doing that, we can't neglect areas where I think we've overlooked. And certainly when we developed that list of exemptions, I think that unfortunately we just didn't give the due credit that we needed to when talking about these very types of products. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions about the bill.
Okay, any questions for Senator Ellis? Any questions for Senator Ellis? Senator James, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious on why it was just feminine hygiene products you chose, and why you didn't choose to include all hygiene products, to make sure it included both sexes, both men and women. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if the good senator from Sweetwater County has a specific example of a hygiene product he would like exempt, but I didn't want to go so far off into the weeds of talking about things like deodorant that men and women use. Some women and men prefer not to use deodorant entirely. So I think it starts becoming a question of, what do you do personally? And I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. I can speak from experience when it comes to talking about feminine hygiene products. And the reason we use that term specifically is because it's in the NAICS code. And so when, if this bill were to pass, it would be identified that way so that the exemption would apply. If you were to shop at a big box store, you might know that, or even your grocery store, if you buy something from the deli, it's categorized a certain way and it's taxed because it's a prepared food, versus your groceries, which are exempt, and those have different codes. And so that's why the use of that word was, that term was used.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else? Any other questions for Senator Ellis? Do we need to actually go through the bill, Senator Ellis? It's pretty straightforward.
I think it's pretty straightforward, Mr. Chairman.
I think I tend to agree. I'm looking over the attendee list and I'm not seeing anybody that wishes to address. Anybody on the attendees? And Abby or Mary Beth, if you guys see a hand up, let me know. I'm not seeing any public testimony on this bill. So with that committee, you've heard the I think you've heard the testimony. What's your pleasures? Senator Pappas?
I move the bill.
A motion by Pappas. Discussion on the bill. Senator James.
I'd like to bring an amendment. I would like to make it more gender neutral, so it includes all hygiene products. And the reason being is because if we make it to just feminine products, it doesn't really, it doesn't really encompass what our state is about, and it segregates and favors one sex over the other. Now, I'm not saying that what happens with women is not important and that type of thing. I just think that when it comes to hygiene, both sexes are necessary to have that hygiene maintenance. You know, guys with, you know, soaps and foot powder and all that kind of stuff when we're out working in the field, in the mines, out in the oil field, you know, wherever we work. You know, I know it's nowhere near what women go through, so it's not a comparison, but we still have our hygiene products that we have to have as well. So I am moving that I bring an amendment that includes all hygiene products. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment? Any discussion on the proposed amendment? Senator Ellis, did you wish to address that? You're muted, Senator Ellis.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I didn't know if it'd be appropriate. No, I think that's one of the difficulties in working on this bill was where do you draw the line? Like, we could go on and on for a list of products that people use in their home. I think the hard part about it was putting some sideboards there, and this is the sideboard that I chose. It's a defined term. And so my concern with that is just, you know, how broad is it and what's the financial impact? And because I brought such a narrow bill, I don't know what that impact is. So the other thing I'd like to mention too is that feminine hygiene products aren't just used necessarily for women. I know a lot of people use tampons when it comes to stopping bloody noses and those kind of things. So it's really, the term is used because I want it to be clearly identifiable in the NAICS codes. And that was the reason that term was used. So I just don't know the fiscal impact of what the good senator's amendment would do.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Senator Pappas?
Mr. Chairman, I understand where Senator James is coming with this. However, I think that the amendment would make it too broad. I think the intent here is not to exempt all hygiene products, you know, toothpaste and whatever. I think the intent here is to get to the products that are connected with the human menstrual cycle, and that's a cycle, and that's strictly a feminine, condition, right? Men don't have that. I think by including this language in a law like this, I don't think it is providing any discrimination against the male gender. It just because males do not menstruate. So I don't really think it's an issue of being discriminatory here, but it does allow these products to be exempted because women do not have the choice of having a menstrual cycle or not having a menstrual cycle. So I just agree that the exemption is a good exemption. I think we need to put it in there, but I think trying to make it so that we're also including the male gender, I don't think we need to do that. And I think it then becomes overly broad, and all hygiene products will be uh, uh, then exempt, and I don't think that's the intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Anybody else wish to discuss? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would agree with the good senator's amendment. I mean, in fact, I looked at the amendment and I thought, I thought the same thing. Basically, we're just going to open it up. We're already going to be taking a reduction, a pretty good reduction here, just with the exemptions that are listed in the bill. I think if you open it up to deodorant and toothpaste and, foot powder and, on and on and on, it's going to be quite a large reduction in funds. And but at the same time, particularly during COVID, I think we're seeing more and more families who are struggling a bit, to buy diapers and feminine products and those kinds of things. And I don't consider those luxuries, and they are needed items, both for females and for adults and for babies, for diapers. And so I believe this is a good bill. I think it's just the catchphrase, it's essential and it provides dignity, I think, to our constituents. And even though I know it's a tough time for us to take a look at, the fiscal impact of a reduction, I just think this bill is something that I can certainly get behind, and as it is. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Schuler. And Senator Schuler, I have a personal request. If it's not a burden to you, would you refer to me as chairman instead of chair? I've never come around to that. And whatever a female member of the legislature wants to be called, the chairwoman, chair, whatever, or other people, but just for me, if you wouldn't mind, Chairman, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment, I'd let you do a wrap up if you wish, Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, on this, I mean, I just think that having this bill cover all the having it cover all the essential products that both sexes use, especially in this time when we're having to pinch every penny, is extremely vital. Working outdoors, male or female, hygiene is extremely important. And if you don't have the right hygiene, it causes a bunch of other problems. And then your health deteriorates. And then those costs go up. And when those costs go up, it just domino effects from there. I mean, it can, especially when it gets cold out. And then, with Wyoming weather, be 70 degrees one day, then be snowing the next. So it all stems from having the proper hygiene products. Pennies count, especially here, especially this day and age. So I just think that it should apply to both sexes. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator James. So I'm not seeing any more testimony on the motion. All those in favor of the motion as presented by Senator James, please indicate by raising your hand. I'll vote for that. Okay, back on the bill. Any discussion on the bill? Is anybody concerned about the fiscal note? It does seem like the Revenue Committee, I thought we were trying to get revenue, and it does seem that we're giving up $2 million here. So Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, would you just, for the record, state whether the vote passed or did not?
It obviously passed, Senator Pappas. We don't have to restate it. We're not recording. It's not like that. You're muted, Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, I only saw 2 votes.
2 votes. I think there were 3 votes in favor. Did I not call for the ayes? If I didn't call for the ayes, I apologize. Call for the ayes. Raise your hands. Call for the nays. Okay, it definitely has failed. So I'm sorry, Senator Pappas. I appreciate the correction. Back on the bill, what about the $2 million that we're leaving on the table? Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay through this mask?
Yeah, good enough.
I just think it looks good, so I thought it was important to wear it.
It is a very, very attractive max.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I would comment on the fiscal note, and that you know and I know that if this goes to the floor, that's going to be a difficult sell. We're talking about $2 million. I think we're talking the tens of thousands of dollars when we're cutting programs and cutting things. And I think that this will be a difficult one to get off the floor. And I'm quite concerned about the fiscal. I like the bill, but I'm concerned about the fiscal note and the expenditure from the state.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Anybody else on this issue? Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. I mean, I think the fiscal note will be an issue. And it may not make it through, but I think we ought to let the body decide that.
Okay. Anybody else ready for the question? Who calls the roll? Is it Mary Beth or Abigail?
Mr. Chairman, this is Mary Beth. I will call the roll.
Please do. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senate File 27. Senator Baldwin.
Senator Baldwin votes no.
Senator James.
No.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Senator Schuler.
Aye.
Chairman Case.
No. The bill is
Mr.
failed.
Chairman, that bill fails.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Appreciate the effort. I think you'll be back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have a great day.
You too. Appreciate it. Okay, everybody, we have the next bills for our consideration. They're kind of companion bills. So I think if we, it might be best if we talked about them together. And they're both fixes to a bill that we did last time in terms of trying to move the state of Wyoming to the monthly collection of ad valorem taxes on minerals. This would roughly follow what we currently do with severance taxes from our mineral producers. And so we've been trying to grapple with how to get this started. And so we have two bills on the table. And I think it might be just appropriate just to have the two bills and direct the discussion through the two bills. Now I have hard copies, but I'm thinking, is there anybody in the attendees that wishes to lead us a little bit on the two bills? Is Mr. Noble out there? I don't see him. Oh, I do too. Mr. Noble, could we start with you? And then Mr. Riemann, I'm going to bring you in too. Okay. Well, I'm not bringing you in. You're just showing up. Can we find Mr. Noble and drag him out into the light of day? There you go. We can come get you, it looks like. So that's a good thing. I think we'll start with the Department of Revenue, if that's okay, Mr. Noble. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but do you think it's best to just put both these bills out and talk about them this way?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm Dan Noble, the Director of the Department of Revenue. The two bills before you, Senate File 45 and Senate File 60, are two different mechanisms for accomplishing the same thing, and that is to move the actual payment of ad valorem taxes to where it either eventually aligns or in the case of Senate File 60 actually aligns with the actual payment of severance taxes. And they accomplish it from two different perspectives. Senate File 45 begins requiring that payments be made on a schedule different than November and May. It actually makes those more frequent than that. It starts at 25%, goes to 16%, to I believe 12, then 10, and finally 8%, 8.33% on a monthly basis. Then it begins transitioning to where the payments actually align with the severance taxes, and that happens over a 12-year period where you get an additional severance tax payment on an annual basis, somewhat similar to a payment plan, but you're doing it on a moving forward basis. Senate File 60 actually moves the payment of ad valorem and severance taxes to the same schedule, and then addresses the 1 year of production where that is not done on a payment plan basis. In other words, they establish a payment plan for the year of production that would be in arrears. And that's how the two bills function. There is a mechanism in place on Senate File 60, which allows for the establishment of relief for counties that cannot handle that 1 year's worth of production being placed in a payment arrangement. And that's really how the two bills function. One of the things that is also contemplated in Senate File 45 is that the counties are currently collecting this tax on a more frequent schedule. It contemplates moving that obligation to the department, I believe in September of 2021. I might mention that that's probably going to create some significant issues for the department as it relates to administrative costs, because there will be a need for us to establish, I'm not saying it would be a new system, but there would be certainly, we'd have to begin calculating this tax on another basis, and also setting up a separate payment schedule as well as a billing schedule for separate from the mineral severance tax. So there would be some administrative costs with both bills. I believe the administrative impact for Senate File 45 would be significantly higher because we're talking about calculating this tax as well. Whereas from the severance tax perspective, we would be calculating the tax based on the exact same production at that point. And with that, I mean, that's a 30,000-foot level of what the two bills do. I can certainly stand for any questions on specifics as it relates to it. I think there's some others that obviously want to weigh in on this as well. But that's the two bills in a nutshell. They approach movement towards the ad valorem tax on the same schedule as severance. One of them, and they approach from different ends. The Senate File 60 immediately moves to the alignment of severance and ad valorem taxes on the same production level, and the Senate File 45 phases it in somewhat like what was contemplated in last year's bill, and it specifically defines who's going to collect it.
Thank you.
That'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noble. Committee, do you have questions for Mr. Noble? Any questions? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize for not mentioning chair. I was in a meeting this morning where it was Madam Chair, so I apologize.
Different. You're great. No worries.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question on I guess it's SF 60. And it talks about the appropriation, the 10 million from the LISRA to use to be made loans for counties to cover the shortfalls because of those delays. What generally would, and again, being new on the committee, why, I guess I understand why we have the delays, but what is the, and you may not have this data handy, do we have a history in the past of a lot of companies getting behind? Has this just been recent? What do the shortfalls look like? There's just a whole bunch of questions I guess I have with that. If you could elaborate a little bit just on that section. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Mr. Noble, if you can.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, this process evolved over a number of years. There was actually a task force that was created a number of years ago to kind of address the issue of how to deal with the fact that there were a number of bankruptcies that ended up, if you will, creating bad debt at the ad valorem side. There was a certain amount of it associated with the severance tax side, but it was not of the magnitude that it was at the ad valorem side. And that's based on timing. When you consider the fact that ad valorem taxes are paid on a monthly basis, we're pretty much aware of when a person becomes delinquent, because in 2.5 months, we will know. On an ad valorem side of it, it's as much as 18 months before they're aware of that. So that's what's created, I think, this evolution to trying to move to a monthly payment, was the fact that there were some bankruptcies from a few years back that created some real concern at the county level as to whether or not they were being able to get in line, if you will, in a bankruptcy in a timely fashion and deal with these delinquencies in a more expeditious manner than waiting 18 months to do so. I think that's probably as succinct as I can be on why it happened. And the process has been an evolution from this task force ever since.
So, and Mr. Noble, I think you may have used ad valorem at one point in your statement where you meant to say severance.
I'm sorry.
Severance is on a monthly basis, and ad valorem is an annual basis, like your house, and we're moving towards monthly on both.
Exactly.
And really, Senator Schuler, the part of the impetus for going this direction was worrying that we're going to get our money as the industry seems to be collapsing around us, especially about earlier last year. So that was where the bill came from. There are counties that will say that they've had trouble with bankruptcies and they've had trouble collecting their money. So we will hear from that. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question would be on the repayment of these loans. I see the loan will be at a 0% interest, but the repayment schedule is determined by the state treasurer. And so that seems like, I mean, they could put a 100-year note at 0% interest. Seems like there's a little bit more sideboards ought to be put on that. They may never be paid back at that rate. Can someone speak to that?
You bet. We have Mr. Noble up, but we could put it on deck for someone else to address as well. But Mr. Noble, you're welcome to take a shot at it.
Mr. Chairman, I believe on page 2, it kind of contemplates what that payment schedule will look like. Because I believe it's on line 12 of page 2, it talks about making an additional 8% payment until that tax is caught up. So it would actually end up being a 12.5-year payment arrangement. So you'd pay 8% a year for 12 years, and then I believe that would leave you with an additional 4% on the 13th year to actually cover. And I think that's what was contemplated in the bill, was that this would be a 12.5-year payment arrangement. And in Senate File 45, something similar is contemplated. An additional payment of, I believe, 8.33% is made in that bill, and that additional payment basically does the same thing. It moves you closer to where you're aligning the severance and the ad valorem taxes at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Noble. Any other questions for Mr. Noble? I see that we have Mr. Riemann from the County Commissioners Association, so let's hear from him. If you can get yourself unmuted, I'm not sure how to do that. We'd love to see your face. There you are. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Apologize for the little delay there. It kicked me into a new system. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of Wyoming's County Commissioners. With me in the background and available for your questioning are Commissioners Rusty Bell from Campbell County, as well as Commissioner Bill Novotny from Johnson County. And Mr. Novotny is also joined by new Representative Barry Crago.
Okay, let's let them in. And Mary Beth, can we let those people in? It'd be Mr. Bell, Mr. Novotny, and Representative Crago. Thank you. Keep going, Jeremiah. It's clunky and it's good to get people on deck. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, I do have comments for both bills, and I will get to Senator Pappas's question here in just a second about the loan, because that is something that we have some interest in discussing. I wanted to start with an answer to Senator Schuler. And I will start off by saying it wasn't my intent to bring this sort of data. I'm happy to meet offline. I think we're beyond need to get into a debate about some of this, but I do think it is important about where we've been and where we are now. I was asked by the Legislative Service Office, by the Select Committee that looked at this issue, to do some analysis about delinquencies, and we went back to 2009 to do that. I can provide that data to you. I'm going to focus just on data for the last full tax year of collections, and that's tax year 19. As has been stated, there is, of course, that 18-month lag. So that's why the look back to tax year 19. Through those 11 years of information collections, only 3 counties have not been impacted by delinquencies in mineral ad valorem. Those 3 counties are Goshen, Platte, and Teton. The rest of
Teton
them
always has it easy. They got everything up there.
right. Every other county has been impacted to some degree. I won't go into all the details here, but there are, based on my records, at least 3 counties with more than $9 million worth of impact. $93 million over that time frame is Campbell County. Johnson County has over 18 million, Lincoln over 9, and with a few exceptions, it looks like I've got about 7 or 8 other counties that have more than $1 million of delinquencies during that time. We have heard testimony in the past that that's roughly, or at least in any given year, it's about roughly 1% or less of the overall mineral ad valorem. And that's not, that's true during those time frames. But that's kicked up exponentially over the past 2 tax years of collection. And in fact, in this last full tax year, it's now hovering around 10% of delinquencies. In tax year 19, over $65 million was delinquent on both of those payments in that tax year. There's another $58 million that's in some sort of a settlement with those counties during that tax year. So they may have negotiated an agreement, as was passed in House Bill 59, or sorry, 159, or simply have reached an agreement with the company. So again, I don't want to go into all of the data here. I'm happy to provide it, but that's a little bit of context of why this has become so important. Counties are a part of that, but 75% of all of that money goes to the education system. So it is a state issue as much as it is a county issue, if not even more so from our perspective. Mr. Chairman, that's what I wanted to say in terms of background information. I do want to just note that, of course, this remains a priority issue for our association and for our members. We did meet last night to set some positions relative to the bills that you're considering during this week. Commissioners are going to support revisions 1 and strongly support revisions 2. And I'd like to break that down really quickly.
Go ahead, please.
We support revisions 1 from the perspective that if nothing else is done, we need to codify what was passed in House Bill 159 last go round. In case we cannot resolve issues that exist in Senate File 60. Now, Senate File 60 is our preferred vehicle, and I think it's becoming a preferred vehicle for many of the people here. In revisions 1, there are, of course, a couple of issues. We need to memorialize, of course, the incentive or penalty, however you want to look at that, for noncompliance with the payment schedule. And I also think there's additional conversation that's necessary with the treasurers and the Department of Revenue about who should be in the lead. This bill contemplates that that's to be the Department of Revenue. Our counties have been working to gear up for this system as if they were in the lead. So we just need to settle that once and for all and move forward. Mr. Chairman, I'll move to revisions to the rest of my comments will be focused on that bill. And again, we do strongly support it moving forward. A few things about it. One, it's easier to administer and frankly to understand for counties, for the state, for companies from our perspective. It also moves to a true monthly system and does so much sooner. Revisions 1 or Senate File 45 does not make the full transition. It would require your additional action in order to do that. And it takes us a number of years before we actually get to some semblance of a monthly system, whereas Senate File 60 starts that next year. As I said, it also completes the entire transition to a monthly system and ensures that all of those back payments are paid. And as a result of all those things, it shouldn't require further action if we do everything appropriate through this legislative session. I do want to present some issues that are represented in the bill. I did share with all of you a document, a PDF earlier today that represents a spreadsheet that models Senate File 60. And I did share that with the various industry representatives I've been working with. Director Noble, I apologize, I did send that to you just as this meeting was starting. Apologize, I did not send it to you earlier. Director Noble has seen a version of this, so it's not foreign to him. And I've been working with many to try and develop it. The first issue that I wanted to point out is represented on page 2 of Senate File 60. And it's on lines 6 through 8 of page 2. It's the language that reads, the ad valorem tax on mineral production from calendar years 2020 and 2021 shall be paid as provided in this subsection. What is, I think the intent there was that we were going to capture the back payments and put them into this 8% payment schedule that Director Noble indicated would be paid over that 12.5 years. 8% in the first 12 years, 4% in the last half year. The problem, as I read that language, if you look at my spreadsheet for calendar year 2021, that means that no mineral ad valorem is collected during that tax year or during that calendar year. Instead, all of that calendar year mineral ad valorem is captured in the future payments. That's a considerable revenue problem for schools, for counties, for special districts, and is something that I think we have to correct and get back to the intent, which was, again, capturing those back payments and ensuring those are paid in future years. The second issue that you'll notice on this spreadsheet comes from perhaps a misunderstanding on my part, at least in terms of the start, but might require some clarification. And that comes from page 2 of the bill, line 6, where it has the beginning monthly payment connected with production on January 1st, 2022. Now we know there's a 60-day lag in collections, and my spreadsheet suggests that that first collection won't take place until April. Some read it to suggest that it actually would be collected in March. I recognize that it may be that. We just need to get some absolute clarification around which of those 2 months this system would start.
Jeremiah, could you dial in the reference to the bill again?
Yeah, it's on page 2, line 6,
Mhm,
and it's in reference to the production or the beginning of production on January 1st, 2022.
mhm.
I think some read it to suggest that means the first payment would come in March. And that may be right. I don't want to discount that whatsoever. I just want to get this right.
Mhm.
But taking it a step further and why this is important, regardless of whether it's March or April, it means that next year we're going to actually collect either 17 or 25% less in mineral ad valorem during that year,
Right.
which again becomes a budgetary issue for counties, special districts, and schools. So we've got to get some clarification around that and perhaps even move forward that first monthly payment where it actually comes in January,
Mhm.
or ensure that there's enough loan money to cover that.
So thank you, Jeremiah. Let's make sure other folks address that issue when they testify. So we'll got a placeholder there. Thank you.
Right.
Keep going.
And Mr. Chairman, the last thing that I'll reference in terms of the spreadsheet, and it really does show up in your fiscal note, is an issue that exists in particular for that first year, where we're going to be collecting on current production or more current production. And the reality of our situation, and I hate that it's this, is that we're working off lower production numbers. So we are going to be collecting on a lower dollar amount, which could create some budgetary issues for counties. I don't think that's corrected any other way than to ensure that there's adequate loan money to protect the counties as well as all of the beneficiaries of that system in that first year. Now, to Senator Pappas's question, and something that we've contemplated, one, yes, we do think that more money is going to be needed in that loan category for that first tranche, or because ultimately it's going to be paid back. We're going to have excess monies or more monies coming in the back years. We do need to at least address the front end. Senator Pappas, our suggestion is to time limit the repayment of that loan. It is not our thought that it should be 100-year loan, or that's not what we want to get into here. My best guess on the way to do this is give us the same time frame that we're giving industry to pay back theirs, and that would be the 12 and a half payments that ultimately would be there. I did want to just note that I don't think Director Noble is correct that the language on page 2 applies to the county loan. That, as I read it, applies to the industry back payments. The loan is connected with section 3. So I do think it needs its own individual time limiting piece of statutory amendment there. Mr. Chairman, I have one last issue, and I want to thank my friends in industry. Pete Overmuller did bring this one to our attention, but it's pretty significant in its potential impact to us. And that is that you'll remember this isn't amending the entirety of what was passed in House Bill 139 last year. And so in statute 3913-113 at provision C, it has in there that upon distribution of funds to counties under this subsection, this amount shall be proportionally distributed by the county treasurer to each taxing entity within the county as provided in 3913-111. If you go to that provision, which was added by House Bill 159 last year, it indicates that taxes collected pursuant to 3913-113 shall be distributed as provided in this section following final reconciliation of the taxes under 3913-113B. What that ultimately means, and that's part of trying to do that whole reconciliation, because we're going to be making some estimates on the front end, and we're going to have a true up period later on. What we think that may mean is that no funds can be spent or distributed back to the counties until December 21st of 2023. That's not going to be acceptable to anyone trying to fund local government or our schools. So we do need to take a look at that and see if we can correct that issue. Mr. Chairman, I'll close in saying that we've been working with our friends in industry and elsewhere to try and address these. We don't have final solutions for your exact language, but these are the issues that do exist. And they're aware of the things that I've brought to you here today. I'm also working with the county treasurers who have some concerns about this. They like to collect revenue. This will disrupt that system. I will be meeting with them next week. I did talk to their treasurer, president of their association, and she did indicate that I could offer to you that we are trying to work through any of their concerns as well. But those are the things that I would bring forward to you. And Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jeremiah. I do know we've got Treasurer Shell is on the line, so we will get to him in a bit. Questions for Mr. Riemann? Any questions? Questions from the committee for Mr. Riemann? I'm not seeing any. Mr. Riemann, did you want your commissioners to go next? I note that we've got Mr. Sackett here. I think he's with the treasurer's office. And that might be good to hear from him too, but what's your pleasure, Mr. Riemann?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I would love for them to be able to offer any comments that they have relative to this issue. It's deeply important.
Who's the most senior?
Well, within our association, unfortunately for Mr. Bell, it is Mr. Novotny.
Mr. Novotny.
Good
Commissioner,
afternoon.
welcome.
Good afternoon. I hope are we unmuted?
You are.
All right. I want to thank the members of the Revenue Committee for their work on this very important issue over the interim. And as Mr. Riemann indicated, our association has ranked these two bills. Obviously, our preference today would be that hopefully this committee will move both of these bills forward, because it's critical that we get the work that was done when the original draft of the transition to monthly ad valorem was put together, that we get that codified into law. Obviously, with Senate File 60 as our preferred alternative. What Mr. Crego, who is functioning today as our civil deputy, who handles most of these cases where we get into delinquencies with ad valorem, our primary concern is in this chart that Mr. Riemann worked out for you, is that we might even be one more month delayed in when we receive that first payment because of that 60-day lag of when that reporting takes place. So we're actually afraid that it might even be May before in 2021 that we saw that first payment. But certainly that's something that we believe that we can work out. But again, we would just strongly encourage this very deliberative body to move both of these bills forward, with ultimately our preference being on Senate File 60. And I'm going to then yield to my good civil deputy and member of your esteemed body, Representative Crego.
Representative, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a whole lot extra to add. I think Jeremiah and Mr. Novotny have done a great job of explaining our stance. I mean, we've worked really hard over the last couple of years on this issue. It's super important to the counties. And I think it's important that the committee understand we are not trying to create a new tax. We are just trying to change the way it's collected and how it's collected. And that's really what this is about, is streamlining the system to make it easier for the counties and not allow taxpayers to get in such arrears before we even know we have an issue. And that's really what we've, that was the work that went into the last session. And thankfully we got a bill through, and this is sort of a cleanup opportunity, I believe, for all of us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions by the committee for Mr. Representative Craigo or Mr. Novotny, Commissioner Novotny? Okay. Oh, Senator Schuler. You're muted, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. Sorry, I'll try again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on the advantage of moving both of them through, because I felt like after perusing these bills, I really felt like Senate File 60 was really a better bill to get done what we need to get done with the ad valorem tax. But I just wondered what the advantage is to move both of them forward.
So Senator Schuler, I was thinking the exact same thing, but it is a very good point that we need to codify some stuff that's uncodified that we did last year. So we have to make these fit together. And we have to do it because we're not an interim committee. We are the committee. So we have to kind of make this fit, because the next step is to go to the floor. And actually, if things go like they're planned, there won't be another committee meeting in the House, is my understanding. So we really got to try to get this to work together and get the kinks out of it. So I would take that question back to Mr. Novotny. You brought it up, and I think it's a good question.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, I would think that by going ahead and moving both bills, then that would give us time to maybe work on a perfecting amendment of some way of pulling that in, or if at the very last minute there became objections to Senate File 60, that we would still be able to move 45 and get this critical schedule and payment plan that was worked out codified into law, and bury any floor strategy on that, since you'll be the one helping carry it.
Representative.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, all I would add is and Jeremiah can chime in, but I see Senate File 45 as the fail stop. We've already agreed on that language with industry, and that was sort of some negotiated language last year that everybody not necessarily came to an agreement on per se, but it's where we ended up, and we can live with it. But 60 would be preferred if we can work out a few of the kinks. And so I think this buys us a little time to work out the kinks in Senate File 60. And if not, at least we have 45 and we get that codified and in the statute books. Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add just one other point to that. We have received some questions about if members of the committee remember Section F, what was called the safety valve that was included in the original. Neither one of these bills eliminates F, which is that safety valve, which allows the counties to negotiate payment plans with the mineral producers. And I know these were this was a very, very critical provision that was put in place for operators in Sweetwater County and Lincoln County. And neither of these bills does anything to the safety valve.
Right. And Mr. Novotny, if I could tag on, that provision was codified and is in statute. So that's nothing that we have to put into statute. So thank you. Let's get Commissioner Bell, if it's okay at this time. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll keep it very brief. My colleagues did a great job. I would just remind the committee that around 73% of the dollars that we collect in Campbell County are actually K-12 education dollars. And so very important that these two bills move forward for the reasons that we talked about earlier. Making it easier for us to collect those dollars, not just for the counties, not just for the special.
Kind of losing you at the end, Commissioner.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm not sure why the connection's bad.
The very last sentence.
Okay. Anyway, really just trying to help us collect these dollars for not just the special districts and counties, but mostly for the state, as most of them. But the other thing I would tell you is that we have a couple companies paying on a monthly payment system now in Eagle Specialty Materials, formerly Black Jewel, and Navajo Transitional Energy, formerly Cloud Peak. Those monthly payment systems lend a lot of stability to the company, to us knowing that they're making a monthly payment so that we actually know, like Director Noble said, we know 60 days, and actually we're getting a monthly payment every day, every month now. So we know if those companies are having issues much earlier than 18 to 24 months. So that's all I would add. Thank you. I would stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Questions for Commissioner Bell? Any questions for Commissioner Bell? Thank you. We're just going to leave you guys in the room. I've admitted Mr. Obermuller. I think it might be good if we got Mr. Obermuller, and then Mr. Sackett, were you wanting to address anything about the treasurer's office or anything? Hold on, Mr. Obermuller. Mr. Sackett's been there first.
Chairman Case, members of the committee, yeah, I was gonna just maybe talk about the appropriation in $10 million, but I can maybe add that at the end if you would like, or I can go now.
Let's do it now. We got you.
All right, Chairman Case, members of the committee, Matt Sackett with the Treasurer's Office. Just wanted to provide some comments on the $10 million appropriation. Starting, I didn't know how many requests there might be for this money. Listening to the testimony, it seems that 10 million may not be enough. So that could be a lot of additional work for the treasurer's office. If we're giving 20 loans to counties, and upwards of $100 million, I mean, who knows what this could be, but that'd be a lot of work for the treasurer's office. We're not generally in the business of making loans. We're happy to work with this, but it could be fairly onerous if there's a lot of loans and a high dollar value. I also didn't know a whole lot about what kind of term we might put in place, but it does seem to make sense to match to the 12 and a half years has been discussed. That is a large opportunity cost at 0% over 12 years.
It is.
If it's $10 million and one county that gets a loan, that's probably not onerous and not a huge cost. $100 million over 12 and a half years at 0% is a large opportunity cost for the LSR.
Fair enough. Questions for Mr. Sackett? Mr. Sackett, can you think of any other program that the treasurer's administered that would be sort of like this?
We do the large project loan, although a bill last year has kind of moved that out of our office and more into the business council with kind of a collaboration of a number of members. The large project loan is probably the closest thing we get into that lending arena.
Is that the water development large projects?
No, just large project loans, which come through the business council.
Okay.
So the Atlas Carbon is our current acting one. There was a couple up in the Cody area with pharmaceuticals that is since closed. So we do about one of those every 4 years historically. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the closest thing. The business council does manage, economic crisis loans, which would be somewhat similar to this, although I have not talked to the business council about this idea. We're happy to help. Of course, we'd have to work with the counties, and the Department of Revenue. I would assume these would just be for shortfalls because of the transition funding and not because of shortfalls, because of decreases in production. That, to me, that's another issue potentially. Otherwise, we're just giving away money for anyone that wants money. So
that's kind of a whole other kettle of fish. But and Mr. Sackett, you listened when Mr. Riemann was talking about the importance of when the date first starts, whether it's March, April, or May is very significant in terms of the county's funding as well. I think we all have an interest to try to get that on the early side. Senator James has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are the people's tax dollars being used for loans? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, let me take I think what this bill proposes is, yes, we would use some of our funds to smooth out the effects that counties experience as they go through this transition. And under the Senate File 60, the proposal is to begin to go to a monthly basis, but then essentially to finance that missing year, to go to a monthly basis with the current year, but then let me back up. Let me just start at the beginning with this, if you guys don't mind. So severance and ad valorem are actually on two different schedules. Ad valorem is delayed in the collection. So it's if you think of your own house, and when the county sends out, or the county assessor sends out the tax notice, and you might have gotten it in September this year, something like that. And then you make payments. If you're on a payment schedule with that, you can make 2 payments a year, one at the end of this year, and then one was due in November, and then another one is due in May. But the money that they're collecting, when that's finally collected in May, that's actually 2019's value of your house. That's the taxes that were from 2019. In essence, the county commission had to set the mill levy, the assessments and all. So it's quite delayed. Severance, on the other hand, is much, much more current. So if we're going to take and go and kind of make ad valorem mimic this severance, it's much better for collections. And the whole problem has been you're trying to collect things from years past and companies can disappear. You want to get them as current as possible. So you're sort of jumping ahead to the same schedule as severance. But then there's the gap in the year that we should be collecting, but now it's kind of in the middle. We jumped ahead. And so this is about financing that in the middle piece that counties would have gotten, but now they're getting it on a payment schedule. Now, offsetting that, of course, they're getting their monthly piece from the year ahead, but there is a cash flow issue for them, especially if we start later in the year, as Mr. Riemann has done. Now, does anybody want to correct me on all this? Because I probably screwed it up, but I think I got the gist of it. And yes, indeed, this is to bail the counties out a bit to help them with their cash flow issues with respect to that transition. Back to you, Senator James, or anybody else that wants to correct.
So I just thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just kind of want to follow up. So is the state bailing out the counties, or is the counties bailing out private sector?
Well, I'm not sure anybody's bailing out anybody, but I will take a crack at it, and we'll go to Commissioner Bell.
Or loaning, or where's the loan going to? Is the state loaning money to the counties, or is the counties loaning money to the private sector?
Counties loaning money to or the state is loaning money to the counties.
And then that's where it stops?
Right. I'm going to qualify that a bit, because we do allow these companies to have payment plans so that they pay their taxes not necessarily all at the same time or on a particular schedule. And so with respect to that payment plan, you could look at that as a loan, but it's actually, we're deferring the collection of some taxes. Commissioner Bell, you want to bail me out? That would be nice if you did.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to try, but I'll probably help. What's going to happen is, because of the delay in collecting taxes, the counties wouldn't be, we would not be collecting that tax. And I wouldn't say that the counties are the ones that might be needing the money as much as cash flow in school districts, because of the dollar amount is, like I said, 73% of our money we collect is K-12. So when they're not getting that distribution over a few different months, it is going to cash strap them. I would say it would probably be a little tough at first on the county, but I think that the counties can make that recovery quicker as the dollars come in. But to answer Senator James's question, there's the money is actually just to cover the shortfall in the collections. I don't know if that helps or not. And I'll let one of my.
Thank you very much,
The
Commissioner.
money coming from the state to the counties.
Go ahead.
And so the counties, that's where the money stops because the money is being delayed coming from the private sector.
Yes.
Okay, so that's where the loan from the state stops.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay. I think that's very accurate.
So we're not violating Article 3, Section 36
No.
appropriate. We're not violating that. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Good. So Commissioner Novotny, you want to weigh in? I noticed that staff has been watching this as well, and I see that they must be laughing their heads off in the back room, and they've sent Dean in to correct everything. So, Mr. Tempty, welcome. Are you guys laughing behind our backs?
Mr. Chairman, no, we are not laughing.
They'd be kind enough to do it to our face.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to offer myself as a resource in regard to the fiscal note estimate.
Okay.
I do agree with Mr. Riemann that it does cause a pretty cash flow issue in FY22. Just a clarification I'm offering, it actually is putting 2 years of ad valorem taxes on a payment plan, not just one.
You're right.
As far as my read. And the total cash flow difference in FY22 is over $250 million.
Okay. Good, Dean. Stay with us. And Senator Pappas, I see you had your hand up. You are muted, I think.
Hitting the wrong keys there, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my question, I know there's impacts administratively, but since this is a 0% loan to the counties, we're going to be investing those dollars right in the LISRA. And so the state typically, if these dollars would have stayed in the state investment pools, would be bringing back some return. So really there's a more of an impact than just it's administrative, right? The state has lost those investment dollars, the return on our investment, and do we have an idea what those are?
There's definitely an impact, Senator Pappas. We might go to Mr. Sackett. He was speculating about that, depending on the size of it. Back to you, Mr. Sackett.
Chairman Case, Senator Pappas, that is correct. That's the opportunity cost that I was kind of referring to, that if we're loaning out, and again, I think it really depends on the amount of the money. Right now, it's 10 million to the first come, first served person. If that's one county and it's 10 million, 10 million is getting 0% for, say, the next 12 and a half years. You're still getting 0% versus, 2.5. I mean, investment outlook for the next 12 and a half years is pretty difficult to estimate. We do invest the LSRA in a couple different tranches. Some of it is fairly conservative. Point is, if we keep this and lend it out at 0, we'll be getting just the principal back over that time period and no interest earnings.
Plus, we'd have administrative costs.
And I'm assuming we would absorb those and get this done as fast as we could, but it could be onerous upon the treasurer's office.
Senator Pappas.
So then how would we end up reporting all this? Would it be just a lower overall return in the portfolio? Is that how it would come out?
Mr. Sackett, can you speculate on how it would be reported?
Chairman Case, Senator Pappas, yes, I would assume we would obviously track this separately, and depending on how many counties and how many loans we had, I'm assuming provide a report to the legislature on repayments. We definitely want to secure this with future tax payments from the counties. So basically I would assume have an annual report, for this, if it's 100 million or something, that's a very different subject and report than if it's 10 million. Well, Yeah, we would track that separately and provide, how many counties, what the loan, amount was, how repayments going, that type of thing.
So just by way of some background, at one time, severance was collected on an annual basis. And it had some of the same arrearages issue. And we moved to collect severance on a monthly basis. But literally what happened to facilitate the transition is the money in between was essentially forgiven. Companies never paid that money. And so that made them very happy to make the transition to monthly severance. It hasn't been that easy to get the transition to monthly ad valorem. And companies have had to figure out how we're going to both pay currently and make up, the stuff that's still in the pipeline. And so our friends in the mineral industry have worked with us, and we've come this far. And all these pieces, the counties have worked with us, and this is one of the cruxes. We could collect money on that loan. We could require 1% interest or something. It's not off the table. It might be a deal breaker for the counties. I'm not sure. But so that is a possibility. And so I'm just trying to give you all some perspective of how we got this far. Senator Papist. You're muted. You're still muted, Senator Pappas. We'll get back to you, Senator Pappas, if that's all right. Abigail, maybe you can unmute him. Can you do that? I'm honestly not doing it. Okay. Keep working on it, Senator Pappas. When you get unmuted, let us know. Mr. Sackett, did you have anything else? I was going to go to Mr. Obermuller next. Hello, Mr. Obermuller.
Okay.
Oh, wait, we just got Senator Pappas. Hang on. This doesn't happen very often, so we're back to you, Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I couldn't tap onto the screen to unmute. I had to take the battery out of my mouse and it worked. I lost my train of thought.
It was about interest and monthly payments.
Yeah, there was another question I had. Let me think about it a second.
Okay. Mr. Obermuller, you are finally on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pete Obermuller with the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Sure appreciate this opportunity. Just for the new members real quickly on the committee, POW represents about 200, a little over 200 companies in Wyoming that operate in the oil and gas sphere, ranging from upstream production, both large and all the way down to very small mom and pop, to midstream pipelines, refineries, and then everyone who orbits that, geologists, environmental consultants, and that sort of thing. I want to take a minute, Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me just to step back a little bit. We've gone down a few rabbit holes already, and the trouble is this has taken us years to explore all these various rabbit holes, and so I fear that we're getting some of this a little bit lost. So just starting with the very basic question from Senator Schuler about why we're here. Chairman Case already alluded to it a little bit about the delay in ad valorem, and then there was discussion about delinquencies and all of that. So we know that prior to the last legislative session, you would have a production year, say 2019, and then companies would start to pay their ad valorem tax based on their valuation, the first half in November in 2020, and then the second half in May of 2021. So there was essentially this 18-month delay until full capture of ad valorem from the value of the production year. Unfortunately, in recent years, primarily related to the mining industry and coal in particular, And quite frankly, just two very specific companies, coal companies, there were major delinquencies that caused Campbell County in particular a very, very difficult budget crisis. And so that's what led us to this discussion, really largely driven by the counties, of accelerating that time frame from when production happens to when taxes are paid. And so that has ultimately led to where we are in terms of trying to figure out how to start paying ad valorem 2 months after production, as opposed to waiting for the next calendar year and 18 months. So that's where we are. And I want to say on that philosophy by itself, PAW supports it. There's lots to be commended to paying taxes on a monthly schedule the way that severance is paid. There's parts about that are better even for industry than our current system. And the tie-up has been, Senator Case alluded to, Chairman Case alluded to, that what we're creating by making this transition, and this is really important for Senator James' question, what we're creating by doing this is a period of time where industry is paying both on the new system and on the old system simultaneously. And what got us bogged down in the last session was the initial idea was that industry would be asked to pay that back in 18 months. So essentially paying twice over that course. And the amount of money that oil and gas industry pays in ad valorem simply made that untenable to my members. So what we've all been doing, what this whole exercise is about, is how to get to the payment plan that we all basically support without crushing an industry that's already on its knees, particularly this year. So that's where we are. So what I want to make sure that you folks know is what we're, in terms of the magnitude that we're talking about, over the last 10 years, oil and gas by itself has paid about $6.4 billion in ad valorem. Last year alone, in 2019, when we have data, is $496 million in ad valorem. Oil and gas pays about 70% of mineral ad valorem. And pays about 40% of all ad valorem paid in the entire state from all sources. So that's why, even though delinquencies are around the 1% range over the course of that time, it's large volumes of money. We don't seem to worry about it when Sports Authority goes bankrupt and doesn't pay ad valorem because they didn't pay anything anyway. So it's really on us, and why it becomes a crisis when we talk about ad valorem payments. The other thing to keep in mind, Senator James in particular, about SF60, and well, really both, but moving forward, is industry will be paying ad valorem on a monthly schedule while paying a minimum of 8 or 8.3% of the old system at the same time. So what that means for the state and the counties and the schools in particular is that industry will be paying 100% of ad valorem that they owe in that year, plus an additional 8% every year for the next 12 years. So that is all things being static, which they're not, that is an additional about $40 million just from oil and gas every single year, over and above the ad valorem that we'll pay monthly for the next 12 years. So it's actually, I just don't want that particular revenue win for the state to go unrecognized. We make this transition, and it's a pretty good deal in terms of making sure, in terms of trying to help close the school revenue gap. I'm gonna pause there. I see Senator James is raising his hand.
Yes, Senator James, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that I'm on your guys' side on this. I was just trying to get clarification on that whole loan process, on how it was working. I'm making sure that was just a clarification. I realize how that whole process works, and that we need to make sure that we give that buffer for the mineral industry, and that I realize how much the mineral industry pays in ad valorem and in mineral taxes, and it's a massive amount of money. So I realize how much you guys are paying. So I didn't want it to come across as I was that I was trying to say that you guys weren't paying your fair share. I realize that you guys pay more than your fair share, and you have been for a very, very, very long time.
It's not,
And the way, say again?
well, we definitely note your testimony.
Okay, so yeah, so just want to make sure I was clear on that. So
You bet. And then, we should let Mr. Obermuller finish. And also, I think since he's done a really good job of laying out what the money flows are looking at, maybe Mr. Obermuller would be willing to speculate on how much funding is actually going to have to come from the treasurer's office to fund county's cash flow. So, and I don't mean to put you on the spot on that, but the fact that it's probably not as big as we think because mineral companies are actually paying more. So back to you, Mr. Obermuller, and I didn't mean to get you off track if I did.
No, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator James. I actually didn't take it that way. I just wanted to just make sure that we kind of did a little level setting here on what we were talking about. And as you, since you mentioned that you're on our side, I should probably tell you what side that is. With regard to the bills on the table, we actually agree with the counties that both bills should be moved forward, and we are leaning also towards Senate File 60, and recognize that there have been accommodations, not as many accommodations as we would want, but there have been accommodations made for industry on a long-term payment plan. But we also recognize that the way the bill is written creates hardships for the counties too. And we have to figure out a way to manage that as well. I think that the added 8% helps to cover that. And that's where I mentioned the added 8%, not to just say, hey, check us out for paying so much. Maybe partly that's true, but also because that is essentially the source of paying back the loans to help bridge the county's shortfall back to the state, is that extra money coming in from industry. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll get to your question here in a second, but just to stay on track with the two bills, sort of similar to Mr. Riemann, SF 45 is sort of a fail-safe. One of the biggest challenges with SF 45 is that if you're a new company coming into Wyoming and you send your tax person to go research what your ad valorem responsibility is, and you go check out Title 39, you will only see the monthly payment schedule required in SF 39 unless you know to go look at the session law and realize that the session law not withstood that part and has an entirely different schedule. So that's why SF 45 is also helpful to us in the event that we can't work out the challenges in SF 60. So, but to Senator Schuler's point, the two bills are mutually exclusive. They can't exist together. So eventually, it's really more, we have to, if for some reason things go off the rails on SF 60 and we can't do it, SF 45 needs to be available, really is the bottom line. So it's strange, I know it's not typical, but it is what it is. So then moving on to SF 60, Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of things about it that I would like to know. Number one, what SF 60 really does, and SF 45 too, the current law too, but what I want to make sure is clear in everyone's mind is that when we move up to start paying what I think is in March from January production, but we can have that discussion, the counties will not have set their mill levy rates at that point. So we will be paying ad valorem based on the previous year's ad valorem, mill levy rate, I'm sorry, we'll be paying on the previous year's rate. So that requires what Mr. Riemann talked about of a true up, a reconciliation period that happens later in the year. So what's critical for you to know and for the Department of Revenue to work with us on and make sure that this legislation has flexibility for is that we know that these payments are estimated payments rather than true payments at the time. The reason that's important is because we need to make sure that at the true up period, penalties and interest do not accrue to us for having paid according to the law on the previous mill rate. So to that end, Mr. Chairman, it may just be belt and suspenders, but it would make us more comfortable if on page 2, line 4, after the comma, you simply insert the word estimated in front of monthly.
Okay, we got that noted. And that's of course in Senate File 60.
Yes, sir.
Okay, did you have more?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator Pappas has a question. I'm not sure how you'd like to take it.
Mr. Chairman, this was just back to my original thought. Let's let Pete finish.
So you want Mr. Obermuller to finish and then we'll come back? Okay. And just by way of general housekeeping, we've only got 3 people in the attendees. We've got Ms. Levin, Treasurer Shell, and Mr. Detai. This is a pretty manageable meeting. I'd like to just let them all in if it's okay with you guys. You don't have to turn your video on if you come in or whatever. And then that way, though, you'd be available if we needed and get our attention if we want to include you. So right now, this is the whole world that cares about this issue, believe it or not. And I actually don't think that's true, but there's a lot going on today. So I didn't mean to get you off track, Mr. Obermuller, but we got folks here and we're going to go back to you right now.
I think there's a few thousand school children who really would actually care about this, Mr. Chairman, if they knew. So moving on to the second point, Mr. Chairman, with regard to implementation timing. So the bill on line 6 begins January 1, 2022. So I can't sit here today, Mr. Chairman, and promise you one way or the other that companies will be able to change their systems by January 1, 2022 or not. There's too many unknowns about of how much they're going to have to involve contractors or whether they can make changes in-house to make sure it happens. So I don't know what to tell you. I think about it other than I noted Mr. Riemann mentioned about dealing with that gap by moving the schedule up. That won't work for sure. Moving it back is more likely, meaning moving it to 2023. And keep in mind that the current bill, what we have in current law, and even under SF 45, you don't get to monthly payments till 2024, and you don't get to actual accelerated payments closer to production till 2027. And you don't get to actual monthly payments contemplated in SF 60 until 2034 or later. So moving implementation to 2023 is definitely an improvement and would certainly be a safety valve for us. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to just say one word about Mr. Riemann mentioned the weird sort of circular argument going on between the language in this bill and in 3913.113 and 3913.111, where it seems to prevent the counties from spending or allocating money until the end of the reconciliation period. That's not really our issue, except for one important point, which is if in the case of a reconciliation payment, when we have underpaid, and particularly when it's found at audit, or if we're delinquent in some way, then penalties and interest apply, and we pay that. When it happens in the other direction, where we have overpaid, and that's happened in Sublette County, in Sheridan County, in Johnson County, and in others, the counties get 5 years to pay us back, no interest. So there is the issue of, it's similar to what happens today, but to the extent that counties get the money in the ordinary course of business, as the law says, and they distribute it under the ordinary course of business, and it turns out that industry overpaid, counties will already have distributed that money. Remember, they only keep 17% of it. And so the burden will be on them to pay that back. And we're making estimated payments. So it's possible. I can't promise it, but it's possible that more overpayments will happen than currently happen. So that was part of the reason for that language in HB 159. But I think it just sort of kind of hung on like a barnacle on 159, and now it doesn't match up. And so that does need to be dealt with. But that is an issue in terms of overpayment and underpayment at the end of the day. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, one last thing on timing. it was our understanding at PAW that the entire intent in terms of paying off the old system was that it would be we were paying off for 3 payments, 1 full year and 1 half year. But previous testimony is right that the way it's written is it's 2 full years. So essentially 4 payments as opposed to the 3 that was, I think, intended. So the way the bill is written, the first half payment in November of this year, 2021, would not be due. It would be put into the batch of back payments, even if you started implementation of the bill in January 1 of 2022.
Right.
So that's an issue that, at least for us, we didn't intend it that. So to the extent you want to fix it, that's fine with us.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Obermuller? So, Mr. Obermuller, I followed you. Will you have specific language for the other areas or not of change? Or are you just throwing that out there, hoping somebody else will pick it up?
You mean the final 2 on the timing?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, quite frankly, that those are issues that are more of a challenge to the counties.
That's what I think.
If the legislature is fine with us putting those batches into the back payment, that's okay with us. If it's the legislators, I mean, ultimately it's a policy decision on your part. In the interest of trying to just offer you good faith testimony, those were issues we uncovered in the bill.
Gotcha, and we appreciate it. What I'm a little bit worried about is because it's going to be very confusing if we don't have some improvements to this bill today. And because as I mentioned earlier, this is the committee meeting and it goes to the session now. So I would hope that we could have some improvements in a little bit more than concept if we're going to do a good job of having the bills go through. So,
Mr. Chairman,
I throw that out. Mr. Obermuller.
Thank you. Just on that note, did I hear you correctly that the House committee is not going to take this bill up?
So this is Senate bill. And so it's now let's say these bills both pass today in an amended form. Then the session begins on the 27th.
Mhm.
This will go into the Senate
Mhm.
as a Senate bill. It'll have 3 readings in the Senate. And then currently as it's planned, and I may have this wrong, but I don't think so, then there won't be a second committee in the House. Now, I think there could be, and I would actually like there to be, but with the abbreviated schedule that is proposed for the session that starts on the 27th, just to deal with these committee bills, it's planned to actually go directly to the floor. So this is kind of like a hybridized interim committee and a hybridized committee during a session. But my understanding is there wouldn't be one in the second house. So that's why I'm saying the pressure's on to try to fix it a little bit here. We can introduce floor amendments too, but pressure's on. Mr. Obermuller.
So, Mr. Chairman, with that and just as public testimony, not directed necessarily towards you because it's not your committee, but I wholeheartedly object to that change in process where the House committee does not get to take up bills, and I will make that testimony in other places where it actually matters. But
Mr.
secondly,
Obermuller, I agree with you, and I would support extending the schedule to give House committees time to meet.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And it's the same for bills coming from the House to the Senate.
So to your direct point, though, Mr. Chairman, about suggestion. So at least on the half year,
Mhm.
I think that may not be a difficult change. I don't know that I can write it immediately, but in line 6 and 7, the ad valorem tax on mineral production from calendar years 2020 and 2021. I think you could expand that to just explain that in calendar production from calendar year 2020, the second half of that payment will be paid under the subsection. And so the second half of 2020 is production or ad valorem tax on the second half, and then 2021.
So the language
obviously,
might be
so we'll have
something.
to work with that. I can't write it on the fly.
Okay, so not asking you to, but I'm asking that we all collectively do this, but it might be something like the ad valorem tax on mineral production for the second half of calendar year 2020 and all of 2021, something like that, maybe.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And then
So-
on the, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just trying to be efficient. So what you could think about that more, if you're done with your testimony, but stick with us. This is a collective effort. We can hear from Mr. Detai about the woes of the coal industry. And glad you're here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. I'm Travis Detai, Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. And, you know, things are looking up for the coal industry for at least a year, Mr. Chairman. So, you know, knock on wood. But for the new members of the committee, the Wyoming Mining Association represents the coal companies, the Trona companies, uranium and bentonite as well. I will say that in this whole discussion over the past few years, a lot of it gets focused on coal and oil and gas, but this change also affects our other smaller industries as well, like our bentonite guys, our Trona guys, or our uranium guys, and it affects the Trona guys as well. And, you know, my industry is not monolithic and my membership is not monolithic. And throughout this debate, you know, I've had companies that say, hey, we're ready to go to monthly payments tomorrow. Others, not so much. In fact, we've got a lot of pushback and some that are still kind of concerned about where we're going on that. But the ship has sailed, and I think we're all sailing in the same direction. And I would echo what Pete said and what the commissioners say as well. We would like to see both bills move, and we are probably more supportive of Senate File 60 as well. And Pete pretty much summed up our thoughts as well on that. I guess our thing that we would like is if we could get some more time, and the committee was accommodating in moving that the 8% for the outstanding production to 2023. If we could get a little bump back in the ripping off the Band-Aid portion of the payments to going to monthly, I think that would be helpful. We're at the table and we want to help and we want to try to get this through. So again, I would just kind of reiterate a lot of what Pete said, and then you know, say that you know, we're. It's hard for me to say I support it, but we are supportive of these moving through, Mr. Chairman, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Detai? Any questions? So I'm very pleased that we have a little firming of coal markets, and it shows, I think, a little bit about transitions that were being rushed through the United States power markets. So I'm kind of pleased as well.
Well, you know, we're relying on Pete to keep those gas prices up, and you know, when gas prices go above a certain amount, our PRB coal is competitive, and that's kind of where it's looking here in the short term, anyways. But it doesn't, you know, we can't be Pollyannish of it. It doesn't change the overlying trend of the contraction of our customer base, and that's just something we'll have to deal with that, and you know that very well, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we do, unfortunately. Thank you, Mr. Detai. Any questions for Mr. Detai? How about let's hear from a big Trona. Ms. Levin, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Jody Levin on behalf of the Trona industry. I don't need to repeat the comments of my colleagues. Mr. Obermuller did an excellent job of outlining not only the background, but the current process and certainly the concerns. Industry has worked collectively throughout this process quite well together and with the counties. And so I certainly appreciate the concerns that the counties have articulated today. The one issue I will underscore here that Mr. Obermuller already raised, if there is an attempt to move up the date on the back payments, that really is a non-starter for industry. I think that's when we'll move away from the table. We've been at the table. We've tried to be accommodating. As Mr. Detai said, we don't love this by any means, but we're trying to be, you know, the good corporate citizens that the taxpayers are. but moving that first payment up from 2023 is really difficult for industry. Trona, similar to coal and oil and gas, has had a very difficult 2020. So any attempt to accelerate that date in order to try to address the gap is, in our opinion, really not a solution. If there's an effort to move it back, to try to deal with these administrative challenges, that of course is certainly welcome. And Mr. Chairman, I think my colleagues have already said everything that needs to be said. So we support moving both bills forward. We'll continue to try to work through these. I will say I was not aware, or I did not appreciate the abbreviated schedule for session. That really makes a bill like this extremely difficult to put into a fast-tracked hybrid session. So if nothing else, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there's an opportunity to say this needs more work and hold it for the session in March, allow us to work through those changes. If that's not possible, please know that the Trona industry will work hard to try to help resolve these issues. But that was something I did not appreciate schedule-wise.
Yes, and thank you. And I think I'm correct on that, but somebody will correct me if I'm not. We have other ways to do this. We're all big grown-ups, and one possibility is to have a workshop and to try to, before it hits the floor on the 27th, if we need more work. Now, we couldn't actually approve any amendments or anything, but we could come up with some floor amendments. I mean, you certainly have my commitment if that, and it's not impossible to not, we could just decide it doesn't belong in the abbreviated session. That is fair enough too. I'm a little bit worried about taking more time in transition and running out of time, but I don't want this to be jammed down anybody's throat. This is a huge, important change. We're doing some of the work. Let's decide together, everybody on this screen, what might be the best way to go forward. So one person we haven't heard from is the county treasurers, and Treasurer Shell is here, and it'd be good. He's been the lead for the treasurers trying to figure out how to implement this. So Treasurer Shell, welcome. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Joel Shell, the treasurer in Converse County. I'm here today on behalf of the County Treasurers Association. And we did meet last week to take a look at the position on these bills. Senate File 45, we voted to support. It does what everybody already talked about in terms of our concerns about codification, who the taxes are due to, and especially the quirk regarding the interest on the payments. You may or may not know, we have a payment scheduled for this June. It's due on June 10th, but the current statutes say that the interest kicks in on November 10th and May 10th. So if you're a taxpayer and you pay on June 10th, you're just fine. If you pay your taxes on June 11th, you will then pay 31 days of interest going back to May 10th instead of just 1 day of interest, just from 10th to 11th. So Senate File 45 clears up that issue and would make it clear in a more common system as to when we would collect the interest. So we appreciate that. Senate File 60, we took no position on. As you've heard earlier, there are a lot of concerns about that bill. I think one of the concerns of the treasurers is, of course, we collect on behalf of all the taxing entities in the state, including the special districts and the schools. So if we're having a cash flow problem because of the hole in the budget that Senate File 60 creates, certainly they're having a cash flow problem too. So the bill does contemplate loans to the counties to help us with that cash flow issue. But there's either two issues there. One would be that we are taking out a loan, not just for us, but for the entities we also collect for and distributing money to them. And if that's the case, then we need to figure out what that payment schedule looks like. Obviously, the county doesn't want to be on the hook for revenues that we keep roughly 10 to 12% of and distribute the rest elsewhere. If we are paying back on behalf of others, then we need to figure out if we're withholding that money from future distributions, and if so, how that's going to look. If we're just in it for ourselves, and the word in the bill counties means literally just the county, then I think you're going to hear from the Special Districts Association and those folks about where does their budget hole get filled up with. So those are concerns. We have a lot of other technical issues with the bill. I mean, this is certainly a monumental shift in how we would look at budgeting. As you keep hearing, we have this system where we go back and collect taxes, that were produced 18 months ago. And it makes you wonder what kind of lunatic would ever set up a system where you were waiting that long to get your money. And, the answer to that is for budget certainty, right? The way the system is set up, we certify a value looking backwards, then we can calculate mill levies, collect those, put it on the tax roll and collect it going forward so that we could distribute it to the people that need it and the taxing entities that need it. So we're going to shift that system and say, once we hit this transition, we're going to certify a value, but that value may not necessarily be collected this year. It may be collected elsewhere. And if that happens, that's definitely a shift in how we budget. In terms of setting mill levies, in 2021, we're going to set a mill levy, as you said, Mr. Chairman, for all the taxable value as it's valued in 2020. But then we're not going to receive that money maybe from till 2023 to 2037. And so then as we get that money in, do we distribute it back on the mill levies that were set for the 2020 taxes, or we distribute those on the current levies? So those are all the kind of concerns that Treasurers expressed in our discussion that made us take no position. We're not certainly ready to oppose it. We don't like it, but Mr. Chairman, I guess when everybody comes in and says we don't like it, maybe you've got a system that works. Maybe that's the hallmark for that. So those are the issues and the questions we have, and that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. I would stand for any questions the committee had.
Thank you, Treasurer Shell. Before we do, I've got a little housekeeping. Staff has told me that they believe that there will be committee meetings in the second house. So there will be a House committee. Okay, so let's hope so. But we will work around no matter what. And so thank you, staff, for correcting me. And so we can assume that there will be a committee in the second house. So the House Revenue Committee will probably look at this. Back to the discussion from the good treasurer and questions for Treasurer Shell. Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was just wondering, so if you guys are aware of the shortfall that is possibly going to occur, are you planning for this shortfall and making adjustments to your budget and contingency plans for the shortfall, or are you carrying on as normal?
Mr. Shell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator James, I think if Senate File 60 ended up passing, obviously we would have to start making adjustments as to how we would handle the shortfall in our budget, depending on what happened with the loans, as well as notifying all the taxing entities that we collect for that they are also going to have to do the same. And we would have no choice but to do that. Our abilities, at the county level, depending on the county, to handle that with reserves, are varied all across the state. I mean, it's certainly a different situation in Niobrara County than it is in Converse or Campbell counties. And special districts are the same way. We have a lot of special districts that are very conservative, and when they set a levy based on what they need. They don't go about building significant reserves, and so those districts would have a difficult time trying to figure out how to deal with that type of shortfall.
Go ahead, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I may have missed it, or it didn't really sound like that you guys have backup plans for scenarios like this, and you didn't really plan ahead for this particular situation is what it sounded like to me. And that's what it sounded like. You're just going to play it by ear basically and kind of scramble to make things work one way or another if it passes versus if it doesn't pass. And so, I mean, that doesn't sound very efficient or effective. I mean, it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound very like a very good way to do things, a very good way to run a business. I know I wouldn't run a business that way.
But I might add, Senator James, we're changing the game here.
Right.
And this is a huge change. The way I think we believe that the system of collecting severance and ad valorem is 30 years old. I believe it was in the late 80s that it was changed. So or he might even been earlier than that. So we're kind of set in our ways how we do things, and treasurers actually do a lot of functions for the state. For example, getting money to school districts, which of course used to be a local obligation, but now it's a state obligation in conjunction with the local revenues. So just take that one, for example. Supposing there's a shortfall in the money that goes to the schools. Well, that may not be a problem because the state makes it up through the foundation program. At least I think that's how it would work. But what about other entities? And, you know, the county budget is kind of small compared to the amount of money that the counties collect. And I think we've kind of put them in a difficult situation. But please, Treasurer Shell, comment on Senator James's question if you can.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator James, the budgeting at the county level is just so much different up to this point than it has been at the state level because we deal with certainty. I mean, we certify a value, right? We can use that certified value, which includes the tax production for minerals for the prior year that's already been produced and reported and certified. And then we set the mill levies. And so we know going forward what we're going to get. It's much different. I mean, in most counties. Now you do have counties that are very sales tax dependent, that are making these types of projections like we would start doing with minerals for sales tax. And so, yes, they have systems where they're building in, you know, what do you project the sales tax to be? And then they're building in reserves based on, you know, unforeseen circumstances. And so all of us are doing that. It's just, you know, for the mineral dependent counties that have, you know, budgets on a much larger magnitude, the collections are much larger. They've always had certainty with that piece of it. We know, you know, historically in most counties, we collect over 99% of the taxes, except for recently. And that's why we're having this discussion. So on that basis, when you look at a budget where you know the majority of your budget, you're going to get 99% of, then the piece, you know, as far as what you figure you need to be prudent in terms of reserves, right, to handle any kind of a shortfall, especially with sales taxes, is just not as large as you know, what the state might have. And we've never had to look at something like a Craig report and run reports and say, you know, are we going to meet those targets for the significant piece of our budget? So I can tell you absolutely, if we move forward with this Senate File 60, those are things that we will build into our budgeting process. We'll not rely on that certainty. And instead, we will be reading the Craig report much more closely to see what's happening month to month with projections of revenue so that we can hit our budget targets.
Okay, anybody else? Senator James, did you have a follow-up?
Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
Senator Pappas, go ahead.
No, I'm not on this topic. So if you want to continue on, Senator James, I wanted to bring up my original thought.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Pappas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what kind of effects are you seeing that you're going to need to make temporary layoffs, or what kind of effects are you seeing within the counties during this time while you're during this catch-up time, during this lag? What kind of effects are you going to be seeing?
Treasurer Shell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator James, you know, as of now, we don't know because of exactly what Mr. Riemann brought about, which is we don't know when the beginning of the timing of the payments would be. And it also depends on the county and the magnitude of the revenue that's dependent on minerals. So in Converse County, I could speak to that. We get 80 to 85% of our revenue from minerals. We already look at, you know, already we know last year we had a record valuation because it's based on the prior year. This upcoming year, we already know that we're going to see a 35% decrease in that value. So I think all of the counties that are based, that are mineral dependent, they, you know, when we do have money, we tend to put in reserves and we don't hire additional people or do the things that we know are going to be expenses we have to carry forward. I think the counties have historically been very good at being very conservative. And a lot of times, you know, commissioners take a big hit for that, you know, and as far as what are you doing with this additional money in a boom? Why aren't you building all these things? Why aren't we improving things? And some of that is because you know the bust is coming, and so it's coming behind that. So a lot of the counties, you know, they've already prepared for that system. The difference is when that happens, we usually have a year lag to prepare for it, right? So we know coming next year is the problem, and so we're going to take this transition year, and that's during that budgeting cycle. You're going to figure out. I mean, in Commerce County, we enacted a hiring hiring freeze once sort of all the COVID stuff hit, like a lot of counties did. We took immediate action. But we usually have a year to sort that out. Under this system, under Senate File 60, it's going to hit us much quicker. We're not going to have a year. It's going to happen in the year. And so we're going to have to develop more systems. But Senator James, I can assure you that that will happen. Like all other entities, we are forced to, we balance the budget and we work with what we have in terms of resources.
Okay, let's jump to Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to go back. I had that issue back when we were going through the bill, and I just wanted to touch on that $10 million in line 2 on page 3, I think it is, of the bill. First of all, I want to know how that number was arrived at, who determined that number, and according to Mr. Sackett, Matt had indicated that might need to be $100 million. Well, I don't know. If we leave it at 10 million, that's what's in there now, it's not going to be an issue, it sounds like, with his office. But I guess I need to know how that number was derived at, and if it's too small to do us any good, are we going to anticipate a modification there? Or if we're scared that it's going to impact us in the long run, do we just leave it there or increase it slightly rather than up to 100 million? I just want to know how that number came about.
So thank you, Senator Pappas. I think it was basically a placeholder, honestly. I'm not sure that it had a lot of thought behind it, but we may have more thought now from the people that are on the screen, between the treasurer and Mr. Noble and Jeremiah possibly, as to what might be a more realistic number, and Mr. Obermuller and anybody else you can weigh in too. Mr. Noble, I'll just start with you. Do you have any idea? You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan Noble again with the Department of Revenue. I think you're accurate that it was a placeholder at the time that it was put in. When you look at the fiscal note associated with what cash flow would look like, it's probably going to be a higher number than that. I think that's probably a safe assessment as well. And that will change based on whether some of the discussion about what periods are going to be included in the payment arrangement as well. That'll certainly change that number as well, and Dean can certainly speak to that, I would guess. The part that I got wrong was that what I was pointing to is what the industry will have to pay back on an annual basis, and that's roughly 8%. It would seem to make sense that you'd structure a payment arrangement with the counties under that same premise, because they're being made whole on 8% of it. They could certainly pay back that percentage to the treasurer. I think when you look at this, that probably needs to be memorialized in that part of the document as well, in section 3, to talk about the payment arrangement aligning with what the industry is required to pay as well. I do have a question on Senate File 45, and it relates to timing. It turns the obligation of the collection of this tax over to the department in September of this year, I believe. And we're going to have to design, I'm not going to say it's a new system, but we're going to have to design a payment collection system on the fly that does not match our severance tax collection system, which means I'm going to need time and I'm going to need money as it relates to the administrative impact on that. If we go with Senate File 45, the administration is going to be significantly more difficult and detailed than it will be on Senate File 60. The reason is we already have the majority of the pieces together on Senate File 60 to begin this collection, because it does align almost immediately with the severance taxes that we already collect. So it's going to either one of them are doable. I just want to make sure that everyone understands there's administrative impact that will vary based on which bill is selected. and how to approach that. So with that, any other questions anyone may have, I'll certainly stand for them.
So, Mr. Noble, I might put you on the spot. I think this is all going towards Senate File 60, of course, and but everybody wants to have the fail-safe. So we don't want a fail-safe that's flawed. So we need to get what the department needs, and if you have a suggested amendment for resources for the department and anything about timing that would make Senate File 45 work better, we're ready to listen to that and take up those amendments if you can. We also might, I'm tempted to put you on the spot to produce the language for Section 3 on Senate File 60 about the payment plan. And is that too much to ask? If you could take a crack at that while I move on. I was thinking that Mr. Temke, since he's the numbers guru, might be the best to speculate about what the needs might be. Have I asked you to do too much?
Actually, for Senate File 45, the concern I have is on page 3, line 13.
Right.
That duty becomes the department's in September of this year.
Right.
And that doesn't give me enough time to make that happen, and make that change happen. I would recommend moving that to the following year, which gives me an opportunity to get our programming and stuff in place to make that happen. We're going to have to write an additional module on the mineral tax system to make that happen, and I'll need the time to do that. So I would move that responsibility from September 10th of 2021 to September of 2022 and make that happen at that point.
So let's just talk about that for a second.
Sure.
But then the counties would be implementing more of the transition. Is the way I read that.
Correct.
There would have to be major.
One
major
point to
language.
understand, there's no transition here in 2021. What we're doing is we're moving payments from 2 payments to 4 to 6, but it's the same payments and it's the same it's the exact same calculated tax. We're not actually moving or transitioning from the current schedule to that until later in that time frame. And it gives us the time to make that system, get that system in place.
So if I were just to talk about an amendment, Mr. Temke, I promise we're getting to you. Actually, it's kind of the stage directions on page 3 of Senate File 45, lines 11 through 13. Those would, in essence, move down farther and have a later date. And the lines 15 and 16, 18 and 19, and 21 and 22 would still be under the counties. Is a way I think an amendment would work to do that. And I see Mr. Treasurer Shell nodding a little bit. That's the way I see an amendment working that would do what you want, Mr. Noble. So think about that. And while you're thinking about that, let's go to Mr. Temke. I lost you on my screen. You moved around. There you are. Okay. Mr. Temke, do you have any more thoughts on how much money is needed to cash flow this and what would the obligations for the treasurer would be?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Case, as I mentioned before, the total difference in cash flow for fiscal year 2022 is over $250 million, $258.2 million total. Now, $49.3 million of that is the tax owed to the school foundation. So, I mean, the state wouldn't be borrowing money from the treasurer's office for that. But the pieces for the 31 mil K-12 local resource and the other ad valorem taxes due to counties, cities, and towns and special districts would be approximately $208.9 million. Mr. Chairman, I would also add that Mr. Obermueller talked about that perhaps the first payment on calendar year 2020, if that was actually made, that would change the cash flow picture significantly.
It would.
It would improve the cash flow picture significantly. according to my initial back of the napkin estimates.
So I think it would too, Mr. Tempty. I think it would be pretty significant. So I'm thinking we ought to put in the month, and make it early. But I'm open. But anything else to add? You're going to stay with us, right? And I saw that Mr. Anderson. I'll tell you, staff must be just panicking at what we're talking about because now we've got almost all of them. Mr. Anderson, did you want to address us, or are you just hanging around? Hi, Josh.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, no, just here for questions. I was, and I might have gotten answered as I transitioned from YouTube to here, just on the origin of the $10 million. That was from the bill as it was introduced last year. It had that $10 million in. Again, as you said, I think that was likely a placeholder until we got some more information on what that number should really be. But otherwise, just here for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, hang with us. Thanks for being here, Josh. Okay, Jeremiah, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try not to duplicate any testimony correct in terms of the placeholder. Just a few things, and Mr. Tempty hit on one of these. I think the number that we're talking about certainly is impacted by that calendar year reference, and that's something that, as you'll remember from my testimony, we would like to see cleaned up. And I think Mr. Crego has been working on some possible amendment there. The other part of this is that monthly start. As you see in the spreadsheet that I provided, we're either 17% short or 25% in the calendar year. I'm perfectly fine to accept the notion that the first payment would come in March of 2022. So it would be that 17%.
I think we should just do that. I really think we should put that in the bill.
Great. And then, Mr. Chairman, the only other part of this, and I heard Mr. Sackett talk about this, was the difference in production and whether that should be a part of the equation. From our perspective, my perspective, it has to be, because at least in that first year, maybe the second year, you are collecting at a lower production level than we otherwise would have collected on. So that becomes an impact back to the counties. Now, I fully respect that it should be nothing more than that. We're not here to try and raise revenue for local governments. And just to a couple of other things relative to, there's been some conversation about whether there should be an interest rate applied to that. You know, first off, this bill contemplates that industry would have no interest penalty. I think the same thing should apply, and certainly Mr. Shell and others have indicated that we're collecting money for other people. Counties shouldn't have to pay back a percentage rate relative to trying to keep us all whole. And I respect that we will get back payments, but remember that first back payment doesn't happen until December of 2023. So it's not as if we're going to collect that on the front end. That benefit comes on the back end.
Your point is very clear. Just let me work, thinking out loud with everybody. But Mr. Riemann, you heard the discussion that I had with Mr. Obermuller about changing the language on page 2, lines 6 through 8. And it's one where it says the ad valorem tax on mineral production. And we said from the second half of calendar year 2020 and all of calendar year 2021 shall be paid as provided in this subsection. I'm looking for an amendment that's close to right in there that puts a specific month. And we could say beginning in March of, or something like that. I'm thinking that might clear it up. I'm just throwing it out as a suggestion to everybody. I do think we should push it towards earlier in terms of the cash flow. And then Representative, I see you've turned on your screen. Would you, you still say Mr. Novotny, but that's okay. He's been impersonated before. Would you have something to add? And I
Thank
see
you,
you,
Mr. Chairman.
We'll get to you. Go ahead.
I did try to draft a little bit of language based
Okay.
on what Mr. Obermuller was saying and also what you were suggesting, and hopefully I got it right
Okay.
based on what Pete was saying, and I'm not positive, but I can take a stab at it if you'd like me to.
I think it's great. We're kind of working free form here.
Okay, so on page 2, line 4, obviously before the word monthly, Mr. Obermuller had suggested we insert the word estimated. I think that's right. Estimated monthly ad valorem tax payment shall first be due under this section beginning with production on January 1, 2022, with the first, and this is amended language that I would suggest we add in, with the first payment due no later than March 1st, 2022.
All right, that's good. And then we've got the other amendment there. And then this was all everybody on Senate File 60. Mr.
And then I have additional language to address the second half of the problem.
Go ahead.
And then, so we continue on, the ad valorem tax on mineral production from calendar years 2020 and 2021 shall be paid as follows, and I would strike as provided in this subsection.
Go ahead.
The production from the first half of calendar year 2020 shall be paid 50% in no later than October, and I can't remember the date, if it's October 10th or somewhere thereabouts, we could pick whatever date, but no later than October 10th, 2021, and 50% no later than November 10th, 2021. Production from the second half of calendar year 2020 and all of calendar year 2021 shall be paid as set forth in this subsection below, period. And then we keep the remaining language, and that splits that year and a half or 18 months out over the 12.5-year repayment schedule.
Okay, let's hold this. That's kind of a trial balloon. I think it's good. Mr. Obermuller, were you trying to get in?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd have to have Representative Craigo repeat that second part, but with respect to adding a March date on line 6, Mr. Noble might be able to chime in here, but I don't think that is necessary. What we're trying to do here is match not only the payments but the reporting requirements precisely to severance, and that's the 25th day of the second month after production. That's the way severance is. So Mr. Noble can correct me, but in terms of industry severance payments from January production, they're paying it on the 25th day of the second month after production, which is March 25th. And that's exactly what this language would do, is match that up. So I don't think we need, in fact, I don't want to put in different dates. That confuses the issue further.
Fair enough. All right. Who's next? We're kind of throwing out these trial balloons, and then we're going to get a motion on the bill, and we're going to actually do amendments. So it's easier to talk about them right now. Mr. Noble.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just agree with what Mr. Obermuller said, that it's due on the 25th day of the month and the second month following the actual production. So March 25th is when the severance tax is due, and I think the attempt was to align these two payments under the same schedule. Administratively, it only makes sense to do so, and that is when the tax would be due.
Okay. So we're not thinking March 1st, we're thinking March 25th. But it's actually tied to something else. Josh, you need to get my attention?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and so that date is in subsection B of 113 already, the 25th day of the second month to align with severance tax. There was a little confusion since in the beginning on page 2, line 1, we say notwithstanding subsections A and B of this section. And I think to clarify that and to avoid some of the concern, it might be on page 3 or page 2, line 3 after section, we would say to the extent they conflict with the provisions of this subsection, so that though, to make it clear that those dates in subsection B would still apply, and it would just be basically, we're just trying to not withstand the start date that's included in those sections. And so I think
Would
that
you
would.
do the language again, Josh? Do it one more time.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So page 2, line 3, after section, let's say, to the extent that those subsections conflict with this subsection. And I think that would make it clear that any non-conflicting portions would still be in effect, including the payment date.
So it's just after the word section, insert the words to the extent this subsection conflicts with.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, to the extent those subsections conflict with the provisions of this section or something similar to that.
All right, what else are we going to try to do? To talk about the $10 million, that's still big damn placeholder. But I know it sounds scary. It's not really an appropriation. I mean, we are going to get the money back because we have the, in essence, the call on the revenues that are coming in. And this really is about a cash flow issue that is going to protect the entire state by getting our money sooner. So, and everybody's perfectly right about the interest rate not being appropriate, I think, because mostly what county treasurers do, most of the money they collect is for school districts, it's for hospital districts, it's for special districts. Very little pours into the county coffers on its own. And even if that's it, I'm not sure that we should be charging them interest on this transition when we are not charging the taxpayers interest. And for good reasons too, because we're not charging because they're not going to pay a lot more faster. So I'd like to see us maybe drop the interest rate idea. And I'll tell you what, if we need to put, Sackett might fall over if I do this, if we need to put $100 million as the placeholder here, that's a big dang deal, but that is actually probably worth it. And in the big picture of things, it's probably a good idea. So I'm just throwing out there as a new placeholder, and I'm going to go to Mr. Noble.
Mr. Chairman, I have one final thing, and I think it results from our issue with timing on getting this set up administratively, but also with Mr. Obermuller's concerns about will they be ready on January 1st of 2022 in order to be able to make the transitions on the industry's systems to make this go. Do they need more time, or is that something that they're even able to answer at this point? I think I can probably have the system up and running by January. That gives me, if I have 9 months to get this going, I think we can put some pressure on the company that does our maintenance to be able to make that happen. But I'm just curious as to whether, with a diverse industry like they have, and this is probably for Mr. Detail as well, is January 1st of 2022 enough time for them to have their systems ready, up and running to make the conversion to monthly payment of ad valorem tax? That's just a question that probably needs to be asked of them as much as it is us.
Well, you gave them a chance. I don't know. I wasn't going to do that. Go ahead, Mr. Detail.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In answer to Mr. Noble's question, I would say this: I have some companies that are ready, and I have some that are going to need some more time.
Thank you, Mr. Detail. I kind of thought that's what you would say. Mr. Obermuller and then Senator Papist.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, were you wanting me to answer Mr. Noble's question?
Yeah, do you want more time? That's what it was. And you're going to say yes.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah.
Dang it.
More time is certainly better. It's just safer in terms of getting things ready. Like I said before, most of the companies, particularly the ones with really complicated tax filings with the state, use SAP, and that is difficult to work with. A lot of them can do internal changes for small changes. And so there's just too many unknowns to know precisely what we're going to need to do. And so that's why I say I can't really promise you that we'll be ready on January 1, 2022, but I can't promise you that we won't either. So it's really tough. I just, it's too many unknowns, it's too monumental of a change.
I knew you were going to say that. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have another question, and that's on page 2, line 7.
Okay.
These loans are going to be distributed on a first come, first served basis. And I'm just wondering how that's going to affect, the counties if we don't put a big enough number in there, and how that, is there going to be some kind of a mad rush, or how that whole thing's going to play out?
Senator, so I can speculate on what we might do if the demand for the funding exceeds the amount of funds. And so there's a bit of first come, first serve, perhaps, but there might also be some proration that could be done. The truth is this isn't going to affect all the counties in the same amount. Heavy mineral counties will need much more funds to cash flow. And we could probably dig into that a little bit more. I don't really have all the answers. We could say give it to the treasurer's office to give them some flexibility to decide how to either ration or prorate the payments. That might be the easiest thing to do, and then they'll figure it out. But I see Senator James has his hand up. Let's hear from him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We need to make sure that we have our priorities correct here. We're making sure that we're talking a lot about the counties and making sure the government is funded, but we also need to make sure that we're taking care of the private sector, because if we don't take care of the private sector and making sure that everything is good with them and they are happy and that they stay, there is no government, because they are the revenue source. So we got to make sure we keep that in mind, and that we aren't taxing them to oblivion. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind, because we're only talking about them and keeping their needs in mind. We got to keep the private sector in mind as well. So that's all. I just want to make sure where our priorities are. Thank you.
I totally agree. Thank you, Senator James. I think we've had sideboards that have perhaps narrowed a little bit as we've worked through this in the past year, but there is room for improvement, but I'm disinclined to make extensions. I think we kind of need to drive towards these dates and force everybody to come to the table on them. And our taxpayers have been wonderful. I don't blame them for truly they have, but I'm inclined to hold things to the dates that we kind of have roughly established, try to fix these bills, get them out the door. And then what I'd like to do is maybe have a touch base workshop. The legislators could be included or not, but have folks get together next week if they want to do some more thinking about it before the amendments are introduced into the session, before the session begins. And I think that might give us a little time to check things out in case we made another mistake, and we can do some floor amendments. It's not an official legislative meeting. It'd be a workshop at here. Whether we notice it or not, I don't know quite how to do that, but I'm thinking of trying to do a workshop the day before the session. But I would like to move forward with these bills. So I'd like to seek, I'll get some final testimony, but seek motions on the bills and then amend them and then move on. So let's start with Senator Baldwin, and then we're going to get Mr. Obermuller, who has another comment.
I was prepared to move the bill.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
I don't think, let's move both bills. But this is unorthodox. We got them both on the table, so we might jump around a little bit. Mr. Obermuller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I support the idea of a workshop. I think we're going to have to, gather our heads about all of this stuff again. But I will say, with due respect to Mr. Anderson, the double negative in that particular amendment is really difficult to follow. That we're notwithstanding two sections and then accepting a notwithstanding.
Got a point there.
I think there's an easier way to do it, which, Mr. Chairman, would just be on lines 5 and 6 of page 2. It says shall first be due under this section beginning with production on January 1, 2022. Delete the period, insert comma, and payable on the 25th day of the second month following that production.
Josh, think about that. See if that's an improvement, okay?
And then in terms of the offer from Representative Crago, I just didn't follow it. And so whether you do that, we don't have to do it now, Mr. Chairman. I totally defer to you. I'm happy to do it in the work group. But that one's also an important one, just to make sure that we have that language right in terms of the half payment. And I just frankly didn't follow it. So would like.
So you guys all hanging in here. We're kind of running this meeting informally, but we have a motion on both bills. Let's get a couple of these amendments done. So the amendment that I heard first was I'm on Senate File 60, page 2, line 4, after the comma and before the word monthly, insert the word estimated. We got that? Senator Pappas, would you make that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make that motion. May I?
You want to add in?
No, it's just the location. Would it be, it's monthly estimated? Wouldn't it be estimated monthly?
Yeah, I think it's estimated monthly. I thought that's what I said, but. Okay.
I just heard you wrong. Thank you.
All right, so that's the motion. Anybody out there got heartburn? Anybody, including our panelists, our friends? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Looks like it's unanimous. That's a done deal. Moving on down through that same paragraph. Josh, did you think about Mr. Obermuller's suggestion instead of yours?
I did, Mr. Chairman, and I think that works. Although I also think that another alternative may be to just on page 2, line 2, delete subsections A and B and just say notwithstanding subsection A, because I think that's the only clear conflict where that other date is mentioned. And so I don't think we need to notwithstand subsection B, which is where the payment timing occurs.
Okay, but is there anything else in subsection B that we need to notwithstand? That's where that's the danger.
Yeah, and I was trying to look through that, Mr. Chairman, and I don't believe so. That's where that issue of the what do we call it? Where they reconcile of the payment in subsection B, which is a question I think we need to address if we want to do that. But since we haven't done that in G anyway, I think we still need to have that on the table. And so I don't think there's any harm in changing and just notwithstanding subsection A.
Mr. Obermuller, are you tracking?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and just the cursory read, I think I agree with Mr. Anderson on that. But we can revisit in the work group, but I think he's right. I'm not sure that subsection B needs to be included.
And it solves the date problem.
Seems to.
Okay, how about the counties? Think it might work? Jeremiah? Okay. All right. So that's the motion, is that we, on Senate File 60, page 2, line 2, strike out the words "and be." So it's actually delete because it's new language. So delete the words "and be" in that line. I think Senator Pappas made that motion. I'm pretty sure he did. And all those in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yeah.
think you need to strike the S off a subsection as well.
You're right. Thank you for the catch. Everybody agree? Friendly amendment to his own motion? All those in favor of striking the S or deleting the S and the words "and be," that line 2, raise your hand. We got her done? That's passed unanimously. Okay. Representative Grego, we're back to you on your proposal for in line 6 through 8, and you added something in there. Let's hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would say, depending on what industry would prefer, I mean, we could change this around, but from what I understood, Mr. Obermuller was talking about, and that was still paying the first half. So for calendar year 2020, they would still pay production taxes for the first half of 2020. And so the language I provided was starting on line 8, we would strike the words "as provided in this subsection" and insert the following language: as follows, colon, the production from the first half of calendar year 2020 shall be paid. And just to interrupt myself here for a second, I kind of mirrored this after the bill that's been in place now, which has 50% of the taxes due in October. So, and it's a little more complicated than that, but 25% of the taxes due for the previous year are due in October and 25 were due in November. So the language I have is the production from the first half of calendar year 2020 shall be paid 50% no later than October 10th, 2021, and 50% no later than November 10th, 2021. Production from the second half of calendar year of 2020 and all of calendar year 2021 shall be paid as set forth below in this subsection.
Okay,
and I hopefully Pete can chime in and see if that accurately depicts what he was trying to state earlier. And I'm not positive it does, but and if it'd be more simplified for industry, you could just say all production from the first half of calendar year 2020 shall be paid on November 10th. And maybe that makes that easier for everybody. I don't know, but that's another option.
Why don't you pick one and make sure we get it written down? So I'm throwing it back to you. Just pick one and give us a written version, or say it again slow enough that we can write it down.
Sure. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. And maybe if you don't mind, if we could ask Pete what industry would prefer, whether they would rather have one payment or two, as I originally had set forth.
Pete, it's back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, I think your intent, Representative Grego, is exactly right. And I think one payment is probably just easier. But I will say, Mr. Chairman, I think talking about payment from the first half of the calendar year, and then you pay 50% from the first half, production is different based on calendar. What you really want is half of the total amount that is due that year. So you want to drop the references to calendar timing and just talk about the tax value. So it's actually more like on line 6, 50% of the ad valorem tax on mineral production from calendar year 20 would be due in 2021, in November of 2021. And then the rest, however we word it, the rest is due, it dumps into the back payment bucket. Do you understand? Does that make sense? If you say 50% of the first half of 2020 and all my guys don't do any drilling until the second half of 2020, you're in trouble. You would be in trouble.
Okay. How are we going to work this out? And Ms. Levin, did you have something?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just turned my video on in case there were questions.
Okay. All right. Representative Craigo, Mr. Obermuller, can you bring us home somehow? One of you's got to do it.
Mr. Chairman, if you give me just a couple minutes, because
got
that's
it.
going to require a rewrite that, and Mr. Obermuller brings up
We'll
a
come
great
back to
point.
this topic and you guys can back channel back and forth or whatever. I'm just going to jump ahead to the placeholder of $10 million. And I would like to suggest that we raise it substantially. And I'm looking out there and I'm 100 million, give or take, comes to mind. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 100 million scares the living daylights out of me. And I know it's
We're
just
the revenue
it's a
committee.
pass through. What if we went with half, 50 million? Would that be a little more palatable to folks on the committee? Just asking. Thank you.
Chairman,
Senator Pappas.
did I not hear that the actual number was closer to, from Mr. Tempe, about 208 million?
Possibly.
So 100 million is half.
Is that a friendly offer of a friendly amendment? He's offering to go 100. I think you could probably get 100. It probably won't last.
Yeah, I agree. I'll move for 100 right now, and knowing it probably won't be there.
Her motion was on the floor. Is that okay? Will you withdraw or friendly or
Oh.
whatever?
Oh, did she move?
No,
She-
that's all right. I mean, go ahead with the 100 million. Let's give it
Okay.
a shot.
Let's give it a shot. So I just remember this is really cash flow money. We're not really making loans. This isn't like a business venture. This is money on taxes that are going to come in later. It's helping our counties and all the local governments. So that's why I'm thinking it sounds scary, but it's really not. And we do have billions. And Mr. Sackett, if we had to come up with 100 million, we told you to, you could find it, couldn't you?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay, Mr. Senator James.
What guarantee do we have?
Well, I was going to address, I'm not sure that there is a guarantee, Senator James.
I have an issue with that one.
What the law says, or what Section 3 says, and it's Section 3 codified, you guys? It's uncodified, right? Yeah, it'd be uncodified. So I'm just going to read ahead. It says on line 3, it says this amount shall only be used to make loans to counties to cover funding shortfalls caused by the delay in payment of ad valorem taxes upon application to the state treasurer on a first come, first served basis. And so I'm a little worried about the first come, first served basis. And then it says loans shall be repaid by the county on a schedule determined by the state treasurer at an interest rate of 0%. I think there's room for an amendment to say how the loans are guaranteed. And Mr. Sackett might be able to help us with that. But I can say that these loans represent an obligation of the county secured by future mineral revenues. And we could put that in, and then the treasurer, he's going to write up a contract, and that's the way it's all going to work out. They might have to do rules, but Mr. Sackett and then Mr. Riemann.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Sack with the Treasurer's Office. Yes, I think some kind of guarantee language in there is fine. I had also written up a little amendment for that line in there about syncing the timing instead of being a function of the treasurer's office, but basically tying it back to the repayment schedule. So the language I had kind of written up, which might need to be maybe ran through LSO, but in there on that line 7, it says loans shall be repaid by the county on a schedule determined by the state treasurer at an interest rate of 0% per annum. I had just written in there, loans shall be repaid by the county on a schedule in line with the repayment schedule outlined in 3913-113G, which is that paragraph on page 2, at an interest rate 0% per annum. And maybe that's not perfect, but maybe LSO can massage that.
I think that's pretty good. Think about how we would guarantee it, and let's get Jeremiah, and then we'll go to Senator Pappas.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. I think we have to kind of be careful with the dollar figure here and the way that this mechanism is set up. Again, counties only, the county portion of this is rather small, 12 to 17% generally across the county. So you're setting up a situation the way it's structured that the county is actually going to be or potentially could be asking on behalf of many other entities. And you may put counties in a position where they just don't want to do that. They're going to be able to cover their portion and don't want to assume risk for others. That said, Mr. Chairman, to Senator James's question about the risk here, remember the state is actually collecting this money on our behalf and then redistributing it back out to us. So you touch the money before we do. You have mechanisms to withhold if a county isn't paying its obligation or whatever entity is ultimately benefiting from this provision. So I think there are fail-safes in the system, and we're not going to have counties running rogue and not paying back loans. The reality is we will have additional money coming in back years.
But Mr. Riemann, I agree with you, but it doesn't explicitly say that the state can get its fingers on the money that that is coming through. And so a little bit of language about to be guaranteed by the money, mineral revenues collected by the state or something. Wouldn't that be no consequence to you? What do you think?
Mr. Chairman, as long as that's tied towards the loan, I think that we would be favorable to it. Obviously, as I mentioned in committee back in December, one of our greatest fears is that the state is then at some point going to institute an administrative fee subject to the collection on this. And the problem for us is that we're doing this to assist industry line up with severance tax to make it easier on everybody. And so it's not because the counties just want to pass off their traditional duties. We're doing this for a purpose.
We understand. You're clear. Let me ask you one more thing, and then we're going to get Senator Pappas's. Let's suppose the money, it looks like there's going to be a run on the money. When would there be a legislative session in this process when we could correct that if we had to? I'm just asking. Suppose it is 208 million, and it's we got 100 in the kitty, and it looks like there's going to be a run on it. What is the timing of these when these are made, and would there be a legislative opportunity to raise that amount? I'm going to shut the blind over here. Think about that. I'm listening.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, appreciate that question, and I'm kind of running a little bit on the fly here, but obviously counties are going to be starting their budgetary processes for the next fiscal year in just a couple of months. And the way that this bill is structured, there is the potential to begin impacting the second half of the next fiscal year. So we will have to have some funding in preparation for that, assuming that the counties want to go after those loans. And then certainly you'd have a session before the next fiscal year where there could be, hopefully, the remainder of those impacts. And I hope others, including the commissioners and the treasurer, might help me out here too.
So what I'm trying to say is we could revisit this next session, put some more money in the kitty if we had to, and make that effective immediately. It's a possibility. Senator Pappas, you had a point.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to talk about the amendment that Mr. Sackett had offered on line 7. And
yep. Could we make that friendly to the 100 million?
Well, what my issue is he completely took the state treasurer out of that. And I really think we need someone there. I think it should read, loans shall be repaid by the county on a schedule in alignment with county payments to be determined by the state treasurer. I think that still needs to be like, I see,
okay.
state treasurer needs to actually set up the schedule. But it ought to be in alignment with county payments.
Mr. Sackett, you think you got a blend going there?
No.
Do you want to unmute?
No, I mean, I think Senator Pappas's language is okay.
Okay. So could you make that part of the 100 million, Senator Pappas? Or I've got Dean here. Dean's saying stop. Go ahead, Dean.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Case, if the repayment is only based on the second half or half of the 2020 calendar year taxes, that reduces the impact on cash flow to 52.5 million total, which about 42.5 million of that is for the 31 mil K-12 local resource and the other entities, the county.
So we're to 10 million.
Just, Mr. Chairman, I bring this up just because that particular amendment to the bill means you don't need $100 million for loans for this.
Okay. Well, it's a good number, and let's do that amendment.
Sounded, Mr. Chairman, it sounded like to me with those numbers that maybe 20 million is the number.
20 is a great number.
Does that sound right, Mr. Temke?
Mr. Chairman, as I said, again, the total impact on cash flow, 52.5 million. About 10 million of that is on the 12 mills to the foundation program. So the impact on the 31 mills K-12 local resource and all the rest of the governmental entities is approximately 42.5 million total.
So, Mr. Temke, what number do you want us to put in? And you can say, it's okay, we want you to give us a number. Senator Pappas?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just offer $40 million. We're getting close to Senator Schuler's 50.
She was right all along. She was totally right.
She was right.
All right, and how about your treasurer's language? Add it to the amendment.
And then on line 7 or on line 8, after the word schedule, we'll put in alignment with county payments to be.
Okay. And any further discussion? Any further discussion from anybody? All right, all in favor? Josh?
Mr. Chairman, I don't, when Senator Pappas says in alignment with county payments, I'm not, I guess I don't know exactly what reference.
County receipts, right?
What's that?
County receipts is what we should be saying, right, Senator Pappas?
County, well, maybe a reference to 3913, 113G.
Yes.
County receipts under that.
The intent is as the county's getting paid, the state's getting paid back the same amount.
Got it, Josh? Okay. I'm going to venture forward. Anybody else on the screen? Anybody? Okay, committee, all in favor, raise your hand. We lost James on this one. Opposed? Okay, and Senator James, you could put in, try for your language right now about the guarantee. I would think it'd be just a new sentence that says, these loans are guaranteed by the payments the counties will receive under that same section.
Yeah, that sounds good. Just, yeah, something like along those lines. If not paid, then the state will withhold or something like that, their payments from counties or whatever's legal and constitutional, making sure on both on our end as well. So however we need to word it.
And we could probably, Josh, add it into Senator Pappas's sentence where he says the payment schedule. Couldn't we just say and guaranteed by the same funds?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it makes sense right at the end of that sentence on page 3, line 10.
Does everybody understand what I'm saying? So Senator Papst's previous motion just said they pay the money as this money comes in. We add a clause to the sentence or a standalone sentence. It says, and those payments guarantee these loans.
Friendly amendment.
I think it's friendly. Well, we already passed the other one, so.
That's
Any
true.
discussion from anybody out there? Matt, you think you got it? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Got everybody on that one, so it's unanimous. Okay, how about the brilliant folks that have been on the phone back and forth to each other? You guys ready? All right, who's gonna lead us off? Representative Craigo?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll take another stab at it based on my
Okay.
conversation with Pete. So again, line 8, we would strike as provided in this subsection and replace that with the language as follows, colon, 50% of taxes due for production from calendar year 2020 shall be paid on or before November 10th, 2021. The remaining taxes due for production from calendar year 2020 and all taxes due for production from calendar year 2021 shall be paid as set forth below in this subsection.
Okay, Pete, you're good with it? Works?
Mr. Chairman, conceptually it works.
Okay.
I think there may be simpler ways to say it, but we can figure that out later. I think I'm okay with it as a moving the bill forward. One thing I will mention, Mr. Chairman, that I would like to work on, but it will take a little more thought than what we can do is right now what companies can do, even under current law and under both versions and all that stuff, companies can pay 100% of their ad valorem by December. And if they do that, then they're just paid. Everything's good. That's good for us. That's good for the counties. I'd like to preserve the right for any industry to pay 100% of ad val in December of 2021 rather than limiting it to just 50%. I think we can do that, but we have to reference the other part of the statute that allows that to happen, et cetera. So I commit to working on that in the work group. I can't figure that out right now, unfortunately.
Okay, I think we all agree that that should be available, a good thing. Can we get Representative Craigo to do that one language one more time, a little bit slower, so we make sure staff's got it?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. So line 8 on page 2, file 60, we would strike the words as provided in this subsection and replace with the following. As follows, colon, 50% of taxes due for production from calendar year 2020 shall be paid on or before November 10th, 2021.
Stop.
Period.
Okay, keep going.
The remaining taxes due for production from calendar year 2020 and all taxes due for production from calendar year 2021
okay,
shall be paid as set forth below.
Got it.
In this subsection, period.
Right. Okay, staff, we got that one? We got an okay from Josh. So discussion. All those in favor, raise your hand. I've got all 5 of us. Okay. Pete, you got a really good point about that one-time payment. We don't want to lose that opportunity. So you'll keep an eye on that, and other people will think about that too. Make sure we haven't messed with that. I think it's going to take an amendment. I really do. But all right. So I think that that's everything on Senate File 60 that I have been keeping track of. So I'm just going to pick Senate File 60 up and set it right here for the final vote. But let's go to Senate File 45 and let's get some of the department's concerns rectified in Senate File 45 and others as well. So Dan, do you want to lead us through that, or did I catch you off guard?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I think when you go to page 3, lines 11 through 13, it is changing the obligation from the counties to collect that year to the department. And that gives me basically from the time that this bill could be effective at the very most 5 months to get a system up and running to make that do that billing. And I just don't think that's enough time.
Right.
I think what I would recommend is that we put that off until the following year, at which point I'd have a system up and running to make it happen.
Okay, but in the first year, now the counties are going to have more time in the game. So the way this reads on page 3, that would all be county obligation.
Yes, rather than saying department, you would just put in to the counties as follows. On line 13, it says to the department as follows. You just say to the counties as follows.
Yeah, I think that works. And that's a good placeholder and that would work. But I think we're repeating the county obligations because I think that's what it already says on page 2. And I'm trying to get there. But it's a hill of beans. And my papers are all mixed up. So look on page 2, lines 15, 16, and 17.
Yes.
I mean, I guess the difference is the calendar year, but it's payments to the counties.
Yes.
So we could fudge this a bunch of different ways, but you could say production for calendar year 2019 and calendar year 2020, payments shall be made as follows, and not have to repeat it, but it doesn't matter. Let's do it your way. It's cleaner. So the amendment that we'll be seeking is on page 3, line 13, changing the word department to counties. That would be the first part of your amendment. There's going to be more. So, and then Dan, what would be, Mr. Noble, what would be your second part? When would you come in?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that it actually happens by design in the following year on page 4.
Yeah.
It says for the ad valorem tax on mineral production for calendar year 2021, this starts on line 4. The payments shall be due to the department. And so I think it actually works just by the way the statutes are designed.
Little accident. You guys get it? So then the motion that they actually kick it down a year and give the department more time. And then remember, this doesn't change the payment schedules. It just changes who's collecting the taxes. It's rolling out of the counties and into the Department of Revenue. And it changes when that roll happens. It doesn't change the tax obligations or anything. And we accomplish that by changing the word department to counties on page 13 or line 13, page 3. So I think Senator Schuler is making that motion, and then let's discuss it. I'm pretty sure I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to move that change on page
Great.
3.
I love railroad.
from
Let's
counties.
make sure that we're okay with everybody on the screen. Joel, you okay with that?
Yes, the counties can do that.
Okay. I think, Jeremiah, that means we're okay with you. The taxpayers, they don't really care about this one, or do you? Just writing checks, it doesn't matter who it goes to. Okay. I think we can call for the question on this. All those in favor, raise your hand. I got all 5 of us. Okay. Mr. Noble, back to you.
Mr. Chairman, I think the only other issue that I'd have with Senate File 45 is whatever the administrative impact would be. I'm going to have to, and actually we've already asked the vendor that does our computer systems to provide us an estimate of what the cost of both Senate File 60 and 45 will be. We're hoping to have that by the end of the month. But if there's going to be a House side to this, we can probably deal with any sort of appropriation on the other side.
So even if there's not a House committee meeting, but I'm told by staff that there is going to be, so we should be able to fix it. But even if there's not, we could add an appropriation. We could get it, added on the floor over there. Or we could do a placeholder now. If you add an appropriation, it's going to mean that it would have to be re-referred to the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and that's okay. I don't have any problem with that. It's just that we're pretty speculative about the amounts, aren't we, Dan?
Mr. Chairman, I would be really guessing at this point as to what it would be. We're, like I said, we can probably have something by the end of the month. At the end of January, and that should be able to be at least an awful lot less speculative than what I would probably guess on right now.
Josh, just in terms of form and substance, could we add a new change section 3 into an appropriation and just make it $1?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, you could definitely take that approach if you wanted to note to the public and everyone else that there's going to be an appropriation.
I think that's just more honest, even though we don't know the amount. And then, Mr. Noble, if you can refine your estimate, that can be the amendment. But just by putting in the $1, it's going to go to appropriations. But they might be the ones that take the time to talk about your proposal. You've been there before, so. I would solicit from someone a motion to create a new section 3 that would be an appropriation of $1. Okay, Senator Pappas, thank you. Any heartburn with that from anybody? And that will just be the standard language. And Dan, anything else?
I'm not sure where we are on Senate File 60. Could you do the same thing?
I just set it aside. We're going to come back to it.
Okay.
Let's get your appropriation, the $1. All those in favor of that, raise your hand. Boy, Senator James, you're getting to be very spendy being in the Senate. It is noted. Okay, so right now we have both bills amended. They're both sitting here. Dan, you had a question jumping back to the other one?
Yes, there will be some level of administrative impact as it relates to Senate File 62, 60 also. Could you put a placeholder for $1 in there as well? Because we're asking about both bills.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody, the committee, what's your pleasure? Got it from Baldwin. He's so tired. He's seen 10 patients. He's double billed this whole damn day. Okay. So the idea would be to jump back to Senate File 60 and add the same $1. Josh, we okay with that? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. James is, oh yeah, I thought we were getting fiscally conservative. Okay. Although it looks like everybody's on. Anything else on either bill? Mr. Noble. Good.
That's all I have.
Counties. Good for now?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, good for now. I think the working group will be helpful. We do need to fix that one issue relative to the timing that I brought up that Mr. Obermueller brought to us. So we can do that in the working group, though.
Okay. Mr. Obermueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're good for now. So as not to get really confusing, it's more confusing than it really was. I didn't bring up one issue that I'm not sure the legislation can actually solve, but I just want to just plant it in everyone's heads that it's not for us and for the counties in the state. It's not just about the payments. It's also about reporting. Mm-hmm. And reporting they're not filling out like 1040 EZs here. These are really, really complicated. The annual ADVAL gross products form is very large and very complicated. And we've had discussions with Director Noble about making sure that when we switch to monthly, that we're basically just attaching a smaller version to the severance report, and then we still do a large one annually in the true up. Doing what's required annually, monthly would be an onerous burden. And we just got to make sure that that Director Noble has the authority, and the counties have the authority to work with us on that reporting side, as that will really torpedo a lot of it if we can't make the reporting match, and also with the payments. So I just want to make sure everyone is clear on that part. It's a really important part that I'm sure this legislation can solve, but I wanted to get it out there.
Fair enough. Let's hear it. Mr. Noble, do you understand?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do. And I believe that in the beginning of our statutes under the administrative piece of it, it gives us the authority to prescribe the forms that will be utilized in administering these taxes. So I think that we'll be fine with dealing with it on an annual basis. Really what you're doing with the gross products return is you're truing up any reconciliations between what was reported in severance and ad valorem taxes prior to that anyway. So I don't see that being a problem. Now, I think one of the other issues is how to handle penalty and interest associated with over and under reporting on that. I think we can work on that in the work group too.
Okay. I think we touched on a little bit of that before, but
Yeah.
how about the counties? Anything on the annual reporting piece? Treasurer Shell, you're good?
We're good, Mr. Chairman. I do point out that we have a lot of distribution formulas and debt requirements that are based on the certified value. And right now the statute requires the certified value that comes from the Department of Revenue on mineral production to be the prior calendar year production. And so we want to make sure there's some integrity to that process so that we don't end up inadvertently changing the distribution of funds that are currently allocated by the state.
I got you. Okay. So I think we're good. I'll just tell you, I'm going to try to have a working group and see if we can actually have it noticed. It'll probably blow up the system because if the legislators are going to be there, I think it should be noticed to the public if I can achieve that. If I can't, we're still going to have a working group. And everybody's still invited. So you don't have to come, but you'd be invited. So, but I'm just going to try to do it through some kind of official channel and get it noticed on our website. But so the intention would be to have it like the 26th, because that would be the day before the session. Possibly the 25th, but I'll try to get it nailed down in the morning. And so that would be my intention, but probably the 26th. I think that would be better. Thinking in the AM because people will be traveling. Well, nobody's traveling. This is a virtual session. So give me leeway to figure out when it fits on the 27th. What day of the week is that? Does that screw up the counties?
Mr. Chairman, that is a Tuesday, but I
That's what I was
believe
thinking.
that next Tuesday is a non-commission day for most counties.
Okay. All right. So it doesn't matter if it's morning or afternoon? Probably not.
No.
Okay. All right. So I'll try to schedule it sometime next Tuesday. With that, we have 2 bills on the table. I detect nothing else on those bills. I think you've done some really amazing work today. And so take them in numerical order. Would we please call the roll on Senate File 45?
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senate File 45. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator James.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Senator Schuler.
Aye.
Chairman Case.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that does pass amended.
Thank you. And Mary Beth, let's now have a roll call vote on Senate File 60.
Senator Baldwin.
I think he said aye. Senator Baldwin?
Aye.
Senator James.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Senator Schuler.
Aye.
Chairman Case.
Aye. Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman,
everybody.
that does pass.
That was great work. Senator James, you wanted to talk about revenue, and we certainly have time. Can we maybe try to get done by 5 o'clock? Would that be okay? Just so people can plan? Do you care if these people remain in our screenshot, or would you rather go to just the committee? They're kind of signing off on their own, but your call. You're muted, Senator James.
It's up to you on whatever you, it doesn't make any difference to me.
I think they probably are going to leave us in droves anyway, but we won't kick them out. Let's just do that. So
All right.
the floor is
So
yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of my first idea has to do with severance tax and kind of reconfiguring how that's done. So we make the severance tax usage tax, and on the people outside of Wyoming, everyone that uses coal, oil, wind, solar, or gas outside of Wyoming will now pay usage tax to Wyoming through the companies. So now these ideas are all very beginning. So they'll have to go through committees and through the studies and everything. So if there's issues, that's why I haven't done, these are just to let you know. So the severance tax is replaced with this. The general fund will get its percentage, like the companies to get a percentage of this, so that way they're able to grow and hire more people and that type of thing. The people of Wyoming, since this will be part of the energy sector, I'd like to be able to see if there's a possible way to encourage the energy sector to give them like a discount off their electric bill or something like that. And the school land trust fund will be able to continue to get their percentage. Now I know normally with the severance tax is normally to the general fund and to the school land trust fund, correct? That's the two places that it goes.
I think permanent mineral trust fund,
and the general
part
fund.
that goes to the general fund. There's a part that goes to the school foundation. There's a part that goes to highways. It's pretty divided up.
Okay.
There's
So
a flow chart on that runs around.
Okay. So I like to have it kind of go to the same places, but maybe kind of take a little percentage from all of them and kind of have it included in the companies and the people and that kind of thing. But with the amount that we'll be getting, since we'll be turning it into a usage tax to the people outside of Wyoming, and it'll no longer be charged to the internal, it'll be far bigger revenue, and it won't be increasing it or anything like that. So it won't be a new tax. It'll just be turning it into the different direction. So that's just an idea that I think the revenue company or revenue committee should look at.
So let me just play this back to you. If I understand you, instead of the severance being collected by the mineral producer at the place where it comes out of the ground, okay,
right,
it would be paid by the people that actually buy the product.
Correct.
And the part I didn't understand was whether the people that buy the product in Wyoming, would they pay the tax? Because for example, if it's natural gas used for heating in Wyoming, would we be paying this use tax on the new severance?
No. So what would happen is this, what it would be doing, since it would be the energy sector, we'd be, it would incorporate, because coal, oil, and gas have been complaining ever since solar and wind came to Wyoming about them, wind and solar, not being taxed equally.
Well, they're right on that.
Right.
Yeah, but you're
right.
good. I'm sorry.
So we would turn them all into we would convert it all to an equal measurement, which would be a BTU, because they can all be measured that way.
Okay.
So that's how we would make sure it'd be equal. And so the people inside, the companies and residents and everyone inside Wyoming, those companies would be charged at the same rate as the people outside. So that wouldn't change, but we also have that extra revenue from the outside coming in as well. And that's the big thing, is because right now we're not getting that extra revenue. And that's the main point behind this, is we have all that lost revenue that we're not getting right now. And that's the intent behind this. So people inside, we're not gonna
You mean
exclude them.
Wyoming citizens when you say inside?
Correct.
Yep.
So if they're using it, they're still gonna be charged.
Mhm.
But it's the ones outside that are using it and are not getting charged. Because if they're gonna use our stuff, we're gonna charge them for it.
So I think I can see how it catches wind, and I see how it's
Solar.
Wind and solar, and I see it's a kind of a new way to collect the same amount of money from the energy-based minerals.
Right.
So I was worried at first that you were charging people, within Wyoming and outside Wyoming, different amounts, and that gets you in trouble with the Commerce Clause.
Right.
And now I understand that you're not.
Yeah, it would all be equal, because you're all gonna be charging as a BTU.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but now what about minerals like trona and gravel that we don't do on a BTU, right?
Right, and that's a different thing, because you can't do that. And so I talked to them, and because that's an entirely different sector, and because of their market and of how close it is, mainly because of the Chinese and their synthetic trona, their customers are extremely sensitive to price change. And it wouldn't work for that. So we wouldn't, that wouldn't be able to work for this.
Right. So
that's something that we would have to look at under this and see if we could still make this work.
Okay, that's
And
good.
this is-
Do you want to solicit some discussion on that, or do you want to plant another seed too?
Oh yeah, I have like 5 here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if this would be a revenue or an appropriation. So I'm just going to run this by real quick.
Okay.
This would affect revenue in a way. So it would actually, I'll skip that one. So if we only spend what we have instead of projecting what we might have, then we will have a far more stable economy, in that it will allow us to be far more responsible with the people's money, due to the fact that our revenue is the third most volatile revenue in the country.
It is.
And that would make sense that we have a cash-based budget.
Mm-hmm.
So my idea here is to have a cash-based budget, and we would only spend what we have. We can't look out more than a couple hours without having to worry about our entire revenue sinking like the Titanic. So we need to treat people's money like we do our own, and only spend what we have. So this right here would, by giving our economy, giving us a cash-based system in a roundabout way, and having an extremely stable economy, and doing this would encourage businesses to come here, which would help with revenue. I mean, it's a very passive way of creating revenue. But I know you can see how it would create revenue. It's not, but that's one idea. So here's the actual big one right here. The first one and this one.
Okay.
So we need to invite business leaders and ask them what is keeping businesses coming to Wyoming. If we have such low taxes, which we're always touting, why are they not coming here instead of Texas? We need answers that do not include population. Is it certain statutes that we have? Is it certain regulations that we have? Is there government competing with industries that would be interested in coming to Wyoming? What is it that Texas and Florida offer that we are not offering, and let's beat it? Then we will not have to bribe businesses to come here with taxpayer money. And then when that money dries up, those businesses leave, and then the people of Wyoming are left hanging there, and except for some are left richer. So I think this is time, I say we take a different approach to the revenue committee and actually look at bringing revenue to our state. And the best way to do this is bring in private sector jobs and private sector businesses other than the extraction industry. We have done that for many decades. And if one wants to come in and there happens to be a government entity that currently operates, and same thing, maybe we should look at a way to turn that over to the private sector. Especially if they can show that they can serve the people better, because I mean, that is what we're here supposed to do, is serve the people in the best way possible. So when we're here talking to business leaders of Wyoming, we need to be sure we are looking for businesses appropriate size as well. Because in the past, we've been looking for those big businesses to bring in all those tax dollars. Well, we need to start looking at those 1 to 500 people businesses. Because in all these areas, we have vacant business parks. We have all these vacant lots, vacant buildings. We should be looking at trying to fill those up that already have that infrastructure in place. That's what we should be looking to do, fill those up. We need a crawl, walk, run. Once we have those filled up, we have the people coming in, then we can start looking at attracting bigger businesses. So, I mean, but we need to talk to the business leaders of Wyoming. We need to ask their opinion. What's preventing businesses from coming to Wyoming? And we haven't been doing that. And when we have done that, we've ignored them. But there's something preventing them from coming here.
Are you thinking like the Endow effort?
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
No, God, no.
Okay.
Stay away from Endow. That was a horrible idea. Like business, talk to Business Alliance. Cindy Delancey, I mean, she's really good. She has a great idea. Just like people that are in the community that have really good connections that can tell us specifically, okay, talk to businesses outside. These are regulations that they hate that prevent them from doing what they need to do. These are rules that are preventing them. I mean, we have to know specifically what these are. Contact businesses down in Texas. Why'd you move there? Why didn't you come to Wyoming? That's what we need to do. Call a business council. Why didn't any of those businesses come from California? Why aren't they coming here? Why didn't you call them? And don't talk about population. I mean, why are there none of the small businesses coming here? I know they got to be taxing the crap out of them. So I mean, there's Wyoming's an awesome place.
It is.
So we've been stagnant for so many years. There's no reason why we should be this stagnant. There's no reason why we should not be growing at all.
Let's, shall we open it up to the committee and see if anybody wants to discuss, weigh in? Thoughts? We're gonna work for 5 more minutes. Go ahead, Senator Schuler.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I like a couple of these ideas. Always wondered again about that, this last one that you talked about with maybe we haven't done a very good job of marketing Wyoming and contacting our business leaders and finding out why we're missing out, on some of these companies. We just recently had a new marketing director hired by our city here a couple years ago, and he's really gone out hard and really recruited via the internet and a few other ways, businesses. And we actually have 2 businesses coming from Oregon that are wanting to come to Wyoming and to enjoy our better tax structure. But I don't know, without his leadership and some upgrades to our internet marketing campaign here, I don't know if that would have happened. But it would be nice to see statewide what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, what could we be doing better, why are we not getting more companies here? And once in a while I hear it's because we don't have the amenities that people want. But I also believe that we have things here that nobody else has, but I just don't know that we market them like we should. And so I think that's a really good idea. And I don't know if you could do it with a poll, or you could do it, I don't know, at workshops, a conference, I don't know. But I think I think you're right on with that particular idea. And I kind of like your first idea too. I think there's a lot of moving parts there, but I would like to, if you get on board with it a little bit more and get a little bit more information, I'd be interested in hearing some ideas on that too. Thank you.
Senator Pappas, then we'll come back to you, Senator James.
Yeah, Mr.
We
Chairman.
would go to Senator Baldwin, but he's got his back to us.
He's trying to run away from us.
He is.
Mr. Chairman, I've discussed this with a lot of economic development folks from all around the state, and typically what I always hear, we do have low taxes, we do have no corporate income taxes and all that stuff that we've heard that you would think would attract business here. And so, but these economic development folks have asked people that same question that Senator James is posing us. And really corporations and businesses are not opposed to paying taxes. They sure, they want to keep their taxes as low as they can, but they move to places where they can find happy, productive workforces. And so they're looking for their employees to have cultural events. They're cultural, recreational, livable communities. And frankly, we have a sector of that. It's the outdoor community. We specialize in the outdoor, hunting and fishing and hiking and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't appeal to everybody. And so there's other ways to make communities livable, but it does take money to do that. And a lot of the places that are attracting businesses, provide, they do tax their folks, and then they build amenities. Here in Cheyenne, we haven't been able to even get a rec center. Can't pass a tax for a rec center. And you don't know how many times I've heard folks say, well, you can't even pass a tax to build a rec center. I don't know that that's a community I want to come to. And then another issue, and hopefully it's changing, but it's not so much here in Cheyenne, but in a lot of the state, they're averse to any growth in the past. Not in my backyard. They like it like it is. So hopefully that's changing, but those are two perceptions that I've been told by economic developers. We just don't have the workforce, and we don't have the workforce because we don't have the amenities and the cultural activities and the livable communities that young people are looking for. We're exporting our young people.
Okay, back to you, Senator James.
Thank you,
We're
Mr.
gonna have to
Chairman.
bring her home it's a good start. But
Right.
James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would be very curious on where these economic developers are looking at, where they're hearing this information, because if they're looking in places where cultural stuff is required and taxes are required, then they should alter where they look, because to have a good time, and that's not really necessary. If you go down south, there's lots of people that would love to come up here. The cost of living is cheaper down there. The pay is cheaper down there. They come up here, they're gonna make a lot more money. And there's lots of places to move up here. And there's lots of places to build a business. And I mean, as far as population to have a workforce, we have it. I mean, but you're going to have, like I said, between a 1 and 500 person business. If you're looking for a 500 plus business, that's not going to happen. We don't have the population to support that type of workforce. We have to have the appropriate type of businesses to come up here. And that's what I don't think that these economic developers are keeping in mind. So we have to have the appropriate study done. And actually, we don't even have to have a study done, because it's very simple, actually. And so that's what I think that I think that should really be a topic within revenue.
So what we do is we will have an interim topics when we kind of get back to normal, and towards the end of the session, we'll settle on interim topics. I suppose if things are more delayed in sessions, we could proceed on interim work at the same time, but there will be a time when we will be asking the committee, asking the people that are watching us on this call to give us interim topics. I think you've got a good thread going. I can see the Business Alliance, the WIDA, the Business Council all being important parts of this. So I worry about, we kind of need to close. This had a fixed amount of time. And of course, staff has been they've had very long days. This is their second meeting that they've been in. And so I'd like to let them go home at a decent time if we could. So I
appreciate them.
And anytime we can have time for these kind of discussions about just ideas that the committee has, I think we should do it if we can fit it in. Everybody's.
I have a lot more.
Huh. All right, but not tonight.
Oh yeah, not tonight, but I have a lot more.
Okay, good. Thank you. I thought it was a really good day, hard day. I'm grateful, Abby, Mary Beth, Josh, Dean, all you guys, if you're still on. And thanks to the industry and all the participants. It was unorthodox, but I think we got through some good stuff today. So thank you all. Have a great.